Good morning and welcome to this formal meeting of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Rob Kendrick and I'm Chairman of the committee. Welcome to all members, officers and guests present today, attending both here in the Council Chamber and on Teams. And in particular, I'd like to welcome warmly our guests from North East Lincolnshire Council who are observing our meeting in the Council Chamber today. That's Councillor Paul Sylvester, Chairman of the Children and Lifelong Learning Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Marion Boyd, Scrutiny Panel Member, and Councillor Daniel Westcott, Scrutiny Panel Member as well. I'll also welcome Janice Spencer, Interim Director of Children's Services from North East Lincolnshire Council at the moment. The video feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council website, and I'd like to welcome members of the press and public who are watching our meeting online today. As the meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I'd like to remind you all that your comments will remain accessible online and can be reported by the media. I'd like to welcome Councillor Mrs. Patricia Bradwell, Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration, and her Executive Support Councillor, Councillor Stephen Rowe, who are in attendance in the Chamber today. I'd also like to welcome the following senior officers from Children's Services: Heather Sandy, Executive Director, Children's Services; Linda Dennett, Assistant Director, Children's Health and Commissioning; Joe Kavanagh, Assistant Director, Early Help; Sarah Nardone, Assistant Director, Sector-Led Improvement; and Martin Smith, Assistant Director, Children's Education. As usual, I'd like to begin with the health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through reception into the front car park and then wait for further instructions. Also, can I please remind everyone to ensure their mobiles and other devices are on silent mode? And also, when you're invited to speak, can you please ensure you switch your microphone on so that members of the press and public can also hear the meeting. Please be aware that you need to speak directly into the microphones to be heard. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please raise your hand and my Vice Chairman, Councillor William Gray, will make a note of your wish to speak. So if we can move on to the business on the agenda today. Item 1 is apologies for absent and replacement members. Jess, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. So we've received apologies from Councillor Blackburn, Councillor Tyrrell, and also Tara Jones, the Interim Assistant Director of Children's Safeguarding.
That's great, thanks very much. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Members of the committee are reminded that they need only to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interests form. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No. Thank you. Item 3 is minutes of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny meeting held on the 13th of January this year. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting of the committee held on the 13th of January 2023 as a correct record. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Sear, and a seconder? Councillor Wright. Thank you for that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Any abstentions? No, that's the minutes agreed. Thanks very much. We'll now move on to item 4, which is announcements by Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. Can I just do my... So I'll give my announcement first. I know Councillor Mrs. Bradwell's keen to give us some information as well. Members of the council should have received or will have received an invitation from the Lincolnshire Music Service to the county group's showcase concert at Lincoln Cathedral on Friday the 14th of April at 7:30 p.m. A reception will also be provided prior to the performance at 6:15. During this coronation year, the Palace wished to explore themes of youth, community, diversity and sustainability. And the concert is a fitting occasion to celebrate our young people and their communities with the opportunity to hear 150 advanced Lincolnshire young musicians aged between 10 and 20 from 30 schools across the county perform a range of orchestral pieces. If you'd like to attend and support our young people, please contact the Lincolnshire Music Service via the email address provided in the invitation to confirm the number of tickets you require. And I myself have attended several of these concerts, and they're very impressive, and I do know from talking to the young people that they appreciate the fact that we do turn up and show our support. So I would urge you to, if you are free, to go to that concert. And just to make everyone aware, we're going to have our customary 10-minute comfort break before item 8 today, so just make a note of that. Now we move on to Executive Councillor announcements, and Councillor Mrs Bradwell, I believe you have an announcement.
Sorry, I was being overzealous, sorry. Yes, just a couple of things for members. You'll remember probably Director advising that we recently had a youth offending inspection. Just wanted to advise members today that that inspection went very well. And just to let people know who are newer councillors, the Youth Offending Service is a multi-agency team. So although it sits within the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, you know, it's the police, fire, district councils, many agencies sit on that, do that work. And we got an outstanding, which is absolutely amazing, because obviously quite clearly we're doing all sorts of work, and we've got all sorts of different, as I said, different people working with us, but it's very difficult to get that. As I say, many offending services across the country, we don't see that very often. So really just wanted to ask the committee if, you know, with myself, to just write probably, if you could, Mr Chairman, just to congratulate the Youth Offending Service on getting that. You know, those sorts of things don't come easy, and they do some amazing work with our young people. They really do, keeping them from getting themselves in trouble and arrested and that. They do so much good work. So that was one of the things. And the other, it's really good news all around today, because Strutt House, which is one of our residential homes for respite, for 12 years now, that home has been outstanding. And again, that is amazing. It's a wonderful place, and I know we're moving it now to a different accommodation, which we're doing up for the young people. But it really is a great place, and I've been there a number of times, and children feel it's like home from home, and that's really good for the young people as well. And just to reiterate what you were saying about the concert at the cathedral is an amazing venue, and to just sit there and listen to the orchestra is really an experience. That's what I would say. So I know it's a long way for some people who are councillors, because obviously we're all over the county, but if you can get, I would ask you to come, because it's just, the cathedral's a marvellous place in itself, but actually the instruments and the music just sounds great in that venue. So that's all, Mr Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, and I think it's very reassuring for members to hear the two positives that you've given us this morning as regards Youth Offending Service and Strutt House. Yes, more than happy to send a letter of congratulations to the teams. Yeah. Do we have any Chief Officer announcements? Heather Sandy, Executive Director.
None from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report 2022. This item sets out the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report for 2022. And I'd like to welcome Chris Cook, Independent Chair of the LSCP, and Stacey Waller, LSCP Business Manager, who will be presenting this report and providing a presentation. We were expecting Philip Clark, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, to represent the police on behalf of the partnership, but as yet he's not arrived, I see. If he does arrive, I'll be allowing Mr Clark to participate for this item, and he's welcome to ask questions to Chris and Stacey at their end of presentation, assuming, of course, he's here. Unfortunately, the representative from the Integrated Care Board cannot attend today to represent health on behalf of the partnership. So without further ado, it's over to Chris and Stacey.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for inviting us to your meeting this morning. I consider as the independent chair that scrutiny plays a really important role in the work of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership. It's going to be a double act, so Stacey will support me in this presentation, support me very well indeed. So I'll open by saying this is a partnership document. This isn't a case of Stacey and I sitting down and writing this together. All the partners in the county have actually contributed heavily to this report. And to assure your members of the scrutiny, I have to say that the commitment of the partners in this county is really good. There is a very strong commitment to partnership working in Lincolnshire. And it's not just about the children's partnership. We link in to all the other partnerships as well, the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, the Domestic Abuse Partnership, and indeed the Adults Board and other boards. And this very week, we've held the Public Protection Board for Lincolnshire, which I chair, and all the boards attend that and report into that group of people. And it is, whilst not a statutory board, it is a coordinating body. So the key message is that partnership working in Lincolnshire is extremely strong. We are focusing on outcomes for children and families, quite rightly so, because that's what we're here to do. And our strategic priorities are agreed for 2022 to 2025. We set those priorities in consultation with our partners, and some of the priorities will continue beyond, because, for example, exploitation, which we will refer to this morning, is a very complex, ongoing situation, not only for Lincolnshire, but across the country. And we need to be ahead of the game in Lincolnshire, and we will continue to do that. And as I've already said, this demonstrates the commitment of the partners here in this county. So I'm now going to hand over to Stacey for the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so we're just going to talk through now the strategic priorities. Or can you just go back? Yeah, thank you. So thinking about our tackling child exploitation, so during 2022, we agreed a quality assurance framework for our operational MACE. So this is the multi-agency meeting that actually meets and discusses children that are at risk of or experiencing exploitation. So it's an operational meeting on the front line, and what we needed to do as the strategic partnership was provide some quality assurance around the impact and outcome for the children. So we're looking at audit activity, we're looking at the training that we offer, we've just started on some stakeholder engagement, so hearing voices of sort of those that participate in the meeting, but also trying to engage with children and young people that have had the experience of MACE, and then also the data. With regards to regular data reports, when we presented last year, we had recently employed a data analyst specifically to look around exploitation. His work has continued to grow from strength to strength and is really valued by the whole partnership. But at the moment, recently, during last year, he was able to produce weekly and monthly reports which go out to children's services frontline team managers and heads of service, so that they have live data reports in relation to what is going on in their locality and how best they can respond to that and have an understanding around exploitation within their area. One of the impacts of this that we're just starting to see is an improvement in the timeliness of return home interviews. So these, again, are weekly reports which are provided, which just means that managers have got that oversight with regards to the work that's going on in their area, and they're able to respond in a timely manner. Another part of that work is actually the engagement with schools, and that last year we had nearly 25% of our return home interviews were completed by schools. So whilst it's not within sort of the grasp of children's services to influence all of that work, I think what that demonstrates is that we're really focusing on the relationship with the child and prioritising that sometimes over the timeliness of it, so that we can really support the child at the right time. In 2023, so obviously this year, we're going to do a thematic multi-agency audit around exploitation to provide assurance around the work that we're doing. and we're also looking at the learning from Op Vigilance. So Operation Vigilance was a coordinated disruption campaign in Lincoln, so it's a period of intensification, looking at a very specific area, almost like on a street basis, and it coordinated multi-agency partners to provide some disruption to exploitation that was particularly prevalent within that area. And what we're looking to do as a partnership then is take that learning, take that understanding around what we achieved and roll that out sort of in other areas of the county where the data is telling us that there's kind of particular areas of concern. In relation to enhancing the emotional well-being of children and young people, we ran our Positive Body Image campaign last year. This is a campaign that I think I'm particularly proud of as a partnership. We engaged with young people, we went out, we got the voices through school engagement around what is important to them, what were the key messages that they wanted to share with other children who may have concerns around how they feel about their body. And I think it was one of the most powerful campaigns that we ran last year. In relation to impact, it was one of those that was most engaged by members of the public as well, just through, and this is beyond me, sort of, but likes and retweets on sort of Facebook and Twitter. So that was one that kind of landed really well, and I think it was because it did capture the voices of children and young people within Lincolnshire. And the one that we're doing this year, and again, is that engagement with children through the schools, is particularly around the emotional well-being of children as well. So it's around what is causing them worries and where they can get help and support as well at a very low level. So that will be the focus of the campaign this year. And then we continue to run our voluntary sector briefings. These started in 2021, and because of the success in engaging with the voluntary sector and with faith groups and charities, we've continued to run these now on a quarterly basis and continue to receive positive feedback. Themes that we've ran during 2022, we collaborated with the Domestic Abuse Partnership, and we had a domestic abuse focus session which coincided with their 16 Days of Action campaign. And we've also run sessions on broad topics like professional curiosity, so actually how can that third sector really ask those questions? What should they do when they're kind of probing? We've got the Wellbeing Service, Safer Recruitment, DBS, so it's a vast range of topics which are all relevant to the third sector, which are delivered during those sessions, and we do that in collaboration with the Adults Board. Yeah, next slide, thank you. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to promoting healthy relationships, which includes relationships across the community and relationships with schools in Lincolnshire. Junior Online Safety Officers, we had a celebration event for these in last year, and we have 79 of these children across the county who are doing a fantastic job. These are very young children who are spreading the message of online safety across their peers within the schools. And that is fantastic as far as I'm concerned. And you'll notice every slide I think that we talk about schools. And the commitment from the schools in this county is first class. And the engagement that we have, quite rightly so, because this is the future. So we're very proud of this scheme. The youngsters, the innovation that they create is wonderful, and we're looking to develop it year on year. So I think that's a really good piece of work. Online, of course, everybody knows that online it has its difficulties. Children can be harmed online, and we do a lot of work on that. They can be exploited online. And so we're putting a bid in to Lincoln University to do some research to assist us in the work that we do, actually, to have that academic background and research. And that will be very helpful. And also engaging with fathers. There are a number of reviews around the country that identify that where children are harmed, there are hidden fathers. And in some parts of the country, they've been known as invisible fathers. So we're looking to get a greater understanding of the fathers. Parents turn up at A&Es sometime with a child that's seriously injured, and details the focus on the parents is the focus on the mother rather than the father. and we need to sort of balance that as well and have the full picture, because in all of these cases around harm and neglect, it's really important to have the jigsaw, all the pieces of the jigsaw in place. And so we're doing a piece of work around engaging with fathers. I'll now move on to the neglect priority, and very high on our agenda, and I'm sure it's high on Heather's agenda as well, neglect, in terms of children. And it's a very complex matter, neglect. Children could live in difficult circumstances around the home and could be considered to be neglected, but actually they're probably loved in some circumstances. So for frontline practitioners to identify what is neglect is very complex. So we're doing a full review of neglect and looking at toolkits to give our frontline practitioners the confidence to actually deal with this very complex matter. And we're working with an external consultant who's got national acclaim in carrying out many, many reviews involving neglect, and she's been very supportive in our work. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So this is our new priority for 2022-25, so to identify and reduce the impact of sexual and physical harm. So highlights from last year, recognising that this is the new one, is we had over 10,000 completions of the Brook Traffic Light training tool. Now this is an nationally recognised and commissioned resource that looks at healthy and harmful sexual behaviours within children, and that's from 0 to 19. So for practitioners, it gives them a guide in relation to what they should be concerned about, what they shouldn't be concerned about, what is sort of general developmental, experimental, normal behaviours, and then when it starts to tip over to harmful sexual behaviours, when they need to be looking at additional intervention to kind of support that young person. The LSCP made a commitment that they would make that we would purchase the resources and have that available for 18 months for absolutely everybody within Lincolnshire for a really small fee. So I think for schools they pay £30, but they can train every single member of staff within that school, from the caretakers to the midday supervisors to the head teacher to the designated safeguarding lead. So it's really a whole system response and approach. So the fact that I think when I wrote the presentation it was over 10,000, we're just having that last push for the last few weeks it's available. So I think that was a phenomenal response from the partnership. We commenced on some work with the Child Sexual Abuse Centre of Expertise, which is commissioned by the Home Office. We're one of 3 pilot sites nationally looking at the implementation of the resources that they have developed. This is a whole suite of resources available for practitioners and includes sort of training. We're looking at data as well as kind of the practical tools to equip the workforce in responding to child sexual abuse. And we felt this was a very pertinent piece of work, and hence why it became one of our strategic priorities, because of a lot of the activity and the concerns around child sexual abuse locally and sort of nationally. And so we continue with that work. We hosted the conference to kind of launch the partnership commitment to addressing child sexual abuse, and we had the centre come and talk, and we had the RAIN Collective come and talk to us, and they are a community group of lived experienced young women who have experienced child sexual exploitation and abuse. And we continue to work with the Centre of Expertise. Their funding's now been extended to 2025, so we anticipate that we'll be involved with them for that period. In relation to the conference, we had over 100 attendees from across the whole partnership, so we were really pleased with the engagement from all sectors. We have been reviewing our sexual harmful behaviour pathway as well, and aligning that with the resources that we had access to from the centre. But that also includes actually where the children are supported and kind of where they can access that support. So thinking about the East Midlands Paediatric SARC unit as well, where they can go, and the CHISFA service and victim links. And I do feel that through this priority, our connections with some of those commissioned services has really been strengthened. So I think that's been a real positive from this piece of work. Further collaboration has come from linking in with the Violence Against Women and Girls and serious violence work stream. So some of them sit within the police, some of them sit within the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. And I think all the 4 boards, as Chris has alluded to, have really worked hard this year in relation to our business plans and our priorities to try and ensure that they are coordinated, that there isn't any duplication, and that we're really kind of pushing upstream, kind of really trying to achieve the same outcomes for children and for adults and for vulnerable communities. And then finally, we're currently developing the partnership child sexual abuse strategy. So off the back of all the work that's been done and the different work streams, we're hoping to pull that together into one partnership response strategy, which previously we've not had. So we're continuing to work on that, and we can hopefully update you next year on that one. Next slide, thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. We reported this last year, ladies and gentlemen, school safeguarding insurance, where we write out to schools. We need to be assured as a safeguarding partnership that schools have all their processes in place to safeguard the children. And I know there was some concern from some of your members last year around the response from the schools in this county. And we did say, and there's that word at the top there, voluntary. It is voluntary. However, we do need schools to engage. And I'm very pleased to report that there's been an improvement from a 66% response to an 80% response in the last year. And we will continue to look. I mean, our objective is 100% response. But it is voluntary. We can't make people do that. We're not a statutory regulator. We don't have the powers of Ofsted, for example. But we need to work together, and we will work together. And we focus on governing bodies, because governing bodies at schools have a responsibility, and the chair of governors in particular. So it's important that we link into this, and we continue with this particular programme. So I am pleased to report that has improved considerably over the last 12 months, but we're not going to be complacent. We're going to pursue even more. Thank you.
Okay, and this is just the final slide, just to highlight some of the other pieces of assurance work that we completed during 2022. You will all have been aware in relation to the really tragic incidents that happened and the publications that followed that in relation to Star Hobson and Arthur Lavinia Hughes. As a partnership, we completed a really robust piece of analysis around the Solihull joint target area inspection that went in after the publication around Arthur, and looked at their partnership. So these are the inspections that as a partnership we're subject to. So they are completed jointly so we have Ofsted, HMIP, I think, are coming back on board. We have the CQC, we HMRFC as well. So it is sort of joint inspectorate come in and they inspect the whole partnership. So we looked at the report and the recommendations that came out of that Solihull JTI, and I think we provided a lot of assurance to sort of the strategic management group in relation to our position. And then looked at, actually, we might be doing things well, but actually, is there any opportunity to do things better and improve them further? So that's a piece of work that during 2023, we will look at those development opportunities. We benchmarked as well against the national panels child protection review, which was specifically around Star and Arthur, so on a personal basis with regards to those 2 incidents. We completed the thematic audit on improving outcomes for adolescents, and that was completed and signed off, and we're currently working against the actions on that. But again, and I think there's some of the good practice is evidenced in the annual report. I think it's really important for our frontline practitioners and our partners to see that good practice, whilst also keeping the momentum on sort of like development areas and kind of where there can be improvements. But it was really heartening to kind of be part of that challenge day and hear sort of the good practice that is going on with regards to adolescents. As I said, I think I said on the previous slide, we did a focused audit on the application of the harmful sexual behaviour pathway, and that is to review the pathway during 2023. And we've also had periods of engagement with the National Panel, the National Audit Office and the DFE. So I think the fact that they are coming to talk to us is a really positive sign as well. We're able to share our structure and our governance and how we work in Lincolnshire and showcase some of that work. And I think when we spoke to the National Audit Office, they were particularly interested in the vulnerability of adolescents. And I think, as Councillor Bradwell's just heard with regards to the inspection around the youth offending team, I think we do have a good grasp in relation to how we are supporting some of those teenagers as a partnership. And in relation to review activity, our Serious Incident Review Group continue to complete a lot of activity with regards to guidance that comes out from the national panel, but also where the sort of serious incidents that may happen, we will look at them in depth and sort of explore if there's any potential learning that comes from that activity. So I think, Chairman, that is our presentation.
Thanks very much, Chris and Stacey. Definitely a double act, but covering some very serious and important topics. And thank you for that very detailed presentation. I'd now like to invite members of the committee to ask any questions or make any points. Councillor Gray, do we have any speakers?
Yes, Councillor Richard Wright first.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Stacey and Chris, who I've known for, I won't say considerable years to you, Stacey, because that'll make you feel bad, but I've known Chris for a long, long time, and other guys. I just wanted to pick up, if I could, on domestic violence that was mentioned, and because that can lead to child exploitation, it can lead to missing fathers, although obviously domestic abuse is not, men are not solely the perpetrators of domestic abuse, but I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's taken an awful long time to get to a position where domestic abuse has risen to the level of recognition with some of the partners involved in this agency with being dealt with. And I don't think that children are yet recognised in the same way, that often it's not just about whether they've had violence committed against them, but the mental health of witnessing it and the imprinting of behaviours going into adult life from what they've seen as children. So do you think that enough is being done at the moment to recognise children as victims of domestic abuse? And if not, where does that need to go? Who can deal with it?
Well, thank you very much for your question, and you're absolutely right. Children are victims of domestic abuse. The trigger generally is the domestic abuse between partners, but of course children are in the home and they are experiencing the violence and the difficult situation and the coercion. Now, in Lincolnshire, there is a new domestic abuse partnership group that has been established. It's under the auspices of the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, but we are linked into that from a children's perspective. Indeed, I've been speaking to Heather this very week about one of the points around children and domestic abuse. Now, the police nationally have an operation called Operation Encompass, where if there is a domestic abuse incident in the home, the police will notify the school as soon as possible. So the school can monitor the child, the behaviour of the child, and if there's any support services needed for that child, it can go in straight away. So it is developing. The domestic abuse partnership is developing and going very well. It's fairly new. It's been given funding from government, but in Lincolnshire it's established itself very well. So we are linked in, children are being supported, and I think it's going well in Lincolnshire. But once again, we're not complacent, and we don't sit back and let things happen.
Thanks very much. Councillor Matthews, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, I do, and thank you for the report. Anyone who knows me knows I'm interested in tables and figures, and I'm looking at the table that relates to the number of courses provided, the number completed and attended, and I mean, that's a phenomenal resource that's out there. Huge numbers of courses being provided and huge numbers of courses to be attended. I can't find anything about impact or benefit. I know there's some very nice wording that says, I enjoyed this course, particularly the face-to-face section, but you're putting an enormous amount of asset into the provision of those courses. Can we hear about the general impact, or is this just people sitting having a cup of tea at home doing an e-learning course to block their time? And excuse the cynicism, but these numbers are huge. So it's either amazing or something not quite amazing.
Okay, Thank you. I think it is sort of a challenge in relation to sort of impact because the numbers are so big and they do sort of sit across the whole partnership. Our 6-year pathway is the mandatory training for many of our partners. It's what they sign up for. We do sort of quality assure the training. With regards to impact, that's where the quality assurance work of the Safeguarding Partnership comes in. So when we look at our audit activity and the multi-agency audit, if we were looking at one around domestic abuse, we would expect that those key themes and that key learning from the domestic abuse training to be evident within the case records, within the feedback from the practitioners, within those discussions. So I think whilst it's difficult for the training team maybe to kind of look at the impact, there is other activity within the partnership that we do complete, and I think single agencies as well expect to see that within their own practice. So they will do single agency audit activity, single agency quality assurance. So Children's Services have got a quality assurance framework, and they would expect to see evidence of the training and the impact of what is best practice within that audit activity. And I think that's probably the key way that is picked up. So within our adolescent audit, there were sort of some themes in there with regards to essentially working with difficult families. So actually what are practitioners doing to try and engage with families that might be reluctant to work with practitioners. So through that audit activity, we can really tailor it to capture some of that impact, and we attribute that to kind of the training and the skill of the professionals and the practitioners.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that reassures me, in as much as what you're saying is you're not clear whether the training is after the event. So we've identified a weakness, so we allow people to go on a training course to strengthen their capacity, or if it's before the event, and there isn't a clear mark against impact. And because of the asset that's being put into this and the man hours, both in the provision of the courses and in the take of the courses, I think I would very much like us to dig a little bit deeper into, is this beneficial, or is it just a box ticking to say we've run the courses and it appears to see that if there's a problem we can respond to it, but I'm not sure if it's actually having a direct impact. It may well be. What I'm not sure is that the report indicates the direct impact that's being had, sorry, and I'd ask for more clarity on that in future, please.
I think Heather used to come in at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Matthews. I think it's a really good point and one we'll reflect on for the report. It's absolutely a blended mix. So some of the programmes we do are evidence-based national programmes that we know have been proven to have impact, so we roll them out with our practitioners. Some of it is a response to something we've seen in Lincolnshire that we've identified through a Lincolnshire audit as being a training need. And I think what Stacey's articulating is actually the impact. We do evaluate at the end of it, but what we want to see is the impact in the work that's done with children and families. And so we check that through audits. So we look at the practice, we look to see, has somebody approached, for example, neglect differently after they've done the neglect training? So we do audits to triangulate that and also to drive further programming. I think we can close that loop in the next report. I think we're getting good at learning from, the questioning's really good. I am really confident that we're seeing impact. It is definitely a blend. So a lot of it is before the event. A lot of it is in response to national thematic audits where we get learning from national cases, where there is national research done and training is developed, and then that is rolled out for our teams. But some of it is Lincolnshire specific, where we identify with a case or a couple of cases, actually we're not quite getting that right. We need to do that differently, and then the team can be really responsive to that. They can go away and look at best practice. They could work with the university, with another local authority, and then we can roll that training out. And one of the things that Ofsted's really keen to look at is how are we closing that loop? How do we make sure that kind of discovering an element of your practice that could be improved, developing the training, auditing to check that that element of your practice is improved, and then moving on, or if it hasn't, developing your training further. And the great thing about this training is that it's truly multi-agency. So when you attend this training, you sat next to people from different agencies, which is bringing us together more and more. So I think we'll make sure we make that impact more clear in the report next year. But I am absolutely clear, and we receive more detailed reports on the different elements of the training through the partnership executive to evaluate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I believe Councillor Sear, you have a question.
Thank you for good report. But a little question I have, because you talk about children at school, being whatever abused. What about toddlers or the baby? How you can deal with that? Because I deliver food to the food, parcel like a food bank, and I come across with if the baby, the newborn, being injured, and they contact the doctor not come out, and so they don't quite sure. End up take the baby to the hospital, maybe 10 days after, and suddenly something turn up, and they take the baby in hospital, and the brother, 2-year-old, into the care. How we can stop that? We don't know it's a parent abuse the baby or the accident. How the guideline to support that, because something quite drastic, the newborn. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I mean, we have across the partnership a wide range of health resources that support the partnership. Midwives, health visitors, GPs, paediatricians, and of course any issues with babies are dealt with in that way by those professionals. And then Heather's directorate has put a lot of investment into early help. And so if there is an issue around a baby where it requires more support, then Heather's resources click into place and provide that baby with that support. If it's a more serious in terms of harm, then once again, there's a multi-agency response to that, including the police and Heather's resources, and there will be a stronger intervention depending on the level that's required. So it's quite wide-ranging in effect, but there is a broad spectrum of support for young babies, quite rightly so, because they are very vulnerable.
Heather, I believe you wish to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sear, and thank you, Chris. So just to say as well, in Lincolnshire, we're unusual. We're one of a few authorities that have our health visiting sitting as part of children's services. So Linda leads our health visiting service, and they do health visiting from the moment the mother's had the baby. They've got those contacts. In terms of the accidental and non-accidental injury, Chris is absolutely right. That decision's made by a health professional. And I guess the response is we wouldn't stop them making that decision. They need to make that decision. It's a health judgment about when the baby's in hospital around that, whether that's an accidental injury or not. And we have to make sure we then follow procedures and protocols as a result of that, following that. And that's something that needs to be in place in order to ensure that we are protecting children. But through those investigations, through the work that we do, through the work we do with the family, we can sometimes resolve those worries, and we can work with the family to remove those worries or to clarify those worries, and then we can move forward. But it is right that we respond where we think children are at risk of harm.
You wish to come back, Councillor Sear?
Thank you very much. But I don't know, I know about midwife and house visitor, how long, you give the service after the baby born. It be like, I know in Somalia you have like so much a month, but the baby little bit old now, but it's her own injury because she was injured quite a while, and they cannot. Suddenly they decide to take to hospital, and the hospital say own injury. But it's my concern if it's a house visitor or the midwife should be aware to do regular on check. I don't know how long after born. Thank you very much.
So, Councillor Sear, I'm conscious not to comment on individual cases, and happy to, if you want to share some details, we can review that. Health visitors are involved with children right up until the age to which they go to school. They're not visiting the home weekly though. The GPs are involved. There are a range of professionals who are involved, and we have a help desk for parents where they can ring our health visit and health desk at any time to discuss any concerns that we've had, and we can allocate the health visitor to go and visit that day. The health visitor, if they've got concerns, because they sit in children's services, can go and talk to their colleagues in social care. and we can undertake an assessment if we've got concerns. Because we work closely with health, we can have that triangulated conversation. So just to assure you, those professionals are involved all the way through, and we have a handover between the midwife and the health visitor, so that if there's been any concerns during the pregnancy or during the birth, they're alerted to the health visitor. And if we had those concerns, the pattern would look different of visiting. So we have, as we do with all our services, a universal offer and a targeted offer. And if we had serious concerns, then we would also have obviously undertaken an assessment and potentially have a social worker involved as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, did you wish to come in? No? No. Okay. Councillor Smith, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. And you'll pardon me, I forgot the name of the operation you mentioned around CSE. And you said you could, well, I was very interested, and you said you could pin it down practically to a street, which to me is amazing, really, that you've got systems that could do that. And I personally would be very interested to see some detail on that in a future report, if possible, because I think, although we're very fortunate in Lincolnshire, we have a very good team with Heather and colleagues around us. We mustn't sleepwalk, because Baroness Casey a couple of months ago was very vocal and said that nationally we haven't learnt the lessons of Rotherham and other horrific cases. So I think, Chairman, in our role of scrutiny, I think it would be prudent to look into that with the help of the partnership in a bit more detail, just to reassure ourselves that we are doing everything we can, and I'm sure we are, but just to make sure that we're not overly complacent. Thank you.
Heather, I believe you wish to come in.
Thank you. Just to say, can we take that one away? Because there will be elements of that information that wouldn't be helpful to put into the public domain. For example, if the police are active in that space, if we're doing any kind of... So can we take that away and think about what we could usefully bring to the committee and then come back to you? I understand your interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I come back as well, Chairman? Thank you. Thank you for your question, and you're quite right. I agree with Heather that we are dealing, and the police particularly, are dealing with a lot of sensitive, confidential investigations, and so we wouldn't want to put those into the public domain. But what I would say is that the partnership has invested heavily, and we do have an analyst now, and that is really important to have that analytical capability, and that's why we can pinpoint things down to street level, and we can, and that is evidence-based as well, because sometimes through rumour, through speculation, we think we know what's happening, but actually having an analyst breaking that down with the evidence actually provides us with the real focused information. But Heather and I can discuss how we can achieve what would you like, Councillor Smith? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the report. It's very interesting for me in my second year on the committee to have this second year of follow-up. And it's good to see that we are able to follow up on an annual basis and see the progression through time of the work of the partnership. I think that's very helpful. And it's positive scrutiny. A couple of issues then I think I've mentioned previously. On the school safeguarding assurance, you quite rightly pointed out that the participation has gone up to 80%, but I noticed the independent sector lagging behind at only 42% completion of returns, which is obviously disappointing. I wonder if that is an indication of the fact that the independent sector does not engage with you as well as you might like. And a second question, which is unrelated, on the junior online safety officers, which, when I read it, is sort of heartwarming. It's such a good sounding initiative, and you just imagine that the children interacting with each other and supporting each other. Absolutely great. But again, we have only 22 schools participating out of 287, is it, primary schools? Is that because of a lack of engagement with the primary schools, or is it because we don't have the resources to roll it out to a larger extent? What's the limiting factor there, please?
Yeah, thank you. And again, the school safeguarding assurance, I think we were really pleased that we'd got that increase, but that, I think, as Chris said during the presentation, that doesn't mean that we're going to be complacent. We did run it this year. We squeezed another one in, so now this year we can come in line with the one that the local authority run, and I think particularly this will give us the focus with regards to those schools and those groups of schools that we really want to target. So we have made more of a concerted effort for this to be an engagement process rather than sort of one directional. So we will continue to work on that, and hopefully if you're at the committee meeting next year, we will be able to report an improvement on that. But definitely it is that we would want to attend with all schools, and I think 100% is very aspirational from our independent chair, so something we will work towards. Did you want to talk about Josso?
Just going back to your point on the independent schools, there's no indication that they don't want to engage with us. I sometimes think it's probably a capacity issue. They're reporting to many other people. They're reporting into Ofsted, and maybe Martin will have a similar experience in his position in education. So there's no indication to us that they don't want to engage. And as I said right at the beginning of this meeting, I'm quite impressed with the way that education does engage with the partnership, and it's so important to us. So I don't think that's a major problem. In terms of the Jossos, I think there's a potential capacity issue for us. I'm not too sure we could cope if every school engaged in that. But we're looking for it to grow. The schools are also engaging in the, I think it's described as the mini police. Some members may have heard of that. And the Lincolnshire Police coordinate that as well. So there is this balance to gain around this. We certainly couldn't cope with over 250 schools in providing such a resource, as much as we'd like. Now, if Heather would like to give us another £500,000 in our budget, that might be a possibility, but I suspect that's not going to happen. So, but within our budget and within our resources, we continue to strive to improve on that.
Thank you. Stacey, I believe you wish to say something.
Yeah, I think just building on that with the Jossos, that is obviously one part of the offer from ourselves and from Mini Police and from the Stay Safe Partnership. And during 2022 as well, the Stay Safe Partnership with our Josso leads undertook to review their offer to primary schools around online safety, because what we're seeing is sort of earlier and earlier that we need to intervene and really support these children. So I think it should be seen within the context of it's one part. Ideally, we would love to be out there to more, and hopefully it will continue to grow, and we are continuing to develop it and review it. So, but I suppose the capacity for schools as well, in that they have to kind of pick which is most relevant for them.
Thank you for your responses. I just wonder if it would be appropriate to set a target for the percentage of schools which are participating in the Josso scheme, to try and get that, and obviously at least to make sure that there's at least one school in each town across the county, so that the thing is evenly spread across. That, I mean, can we not try and resource at least a 20% participation, maybe?
It's certainly something we can look at in developing this by setting a target. As I say, it is voluntary, but yes, we can look at that, certainly. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to sort of talk a little bit about social media and children and stuff, and probably in relation to an issue that I've already contacted Heather and Martin about this week. The impact of social media on children. I mean, it's a very unregulated space, isn't it? And children can be open to all kinds of influences. They can also be subjected to, I mean, I hear there's campaigns, everyone on social media, the peers can, all the others and whatever. But particularly at the moment, in a school in my patch, in Grantham, the children have been on strike this week. I believe there's a TikTok movement that's spreading strikes across various schools across the country. Now, there's all kinds, the pupils are making all kinds of, and it's very hard to obviously substantiate the claims. I'm just going on what I've seen on various Facebook pages over the last 3 or 4 days. pupils complaining about the impact of the imposition of unisex toilets on them and the girls not feeling safe in that particular environment. It's difficult to say, but these are all allegations that there's bullying going on at the school, the school authorities aren't doing anything about it, concerns about child mental health issues as well. Now, these are children posting on Facebook and some of their parents as well. Now, it's difficult to know, you know, because all this stuff's out there on social media. And I did contact Heather and Martin about it earlier in the week. Now, this may be a craze, but there may be legitimate concerns going on at that school. Now, I'm the county councillor for that patch. I've spoken to the 2 district councillors for the patch. The 3 of us have written to the school yesterday, and I've just actually received the email back to say the school are happy to meet with us to discuss. But for me, this raises all kinds of children's safeguarding issues. There's obviously, you know, it could be the reaction to a craze that's going on there, or there could be genuine and legitimate concerns that the pupils have. It's you know, I'm just wondering, I mean, as you were saying earlier, not all schools engage with you. I don't know if this particular school is one of those that does engage with you or doesn't engage with you. But I'm just kind of wondering how something like that can be addressed around safeguarding, because there's an awful lot of stuff going on there that potentially affects the safeguarding partnership, potentially affects children's services here. But also, I imagine there's issues there that affect the Regional School Commission. I don't know. It's difficult at the moment to see how something like that, from a safeguarding position, could be addressed. And as a councillor who's sort of in the middle of this at the moment, who's now potentially going to be speaking, having a visit to the school to speak with the principal next week, it's so difficult to know what to do with it. And I really have genuine concerns, because if there is any credence in the allegations that have been made, there is a very serious situation going on there. It might be they're being over-exaggerated. I simply don't know. But there's enough alarm bells ringing for me to have felt the need to contact Heather and Martin about this in the week, and to write to the school as a group of local councillors to inquire what's going on.
Heather, you wish to respond?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Whittington. And I think you're absolutely right that there's a couple of things to pick up. There has been a movement on a social media platform that is encouraging groups of children to get involved in action within their schools to raise their concerns. And I think some of those children, I agree with you, have legitimate concerns about their well-being, our understanding is that it has caused disruption to learning for children who didn't want to be involved in the demonstrations. And so it's something that needs to be managed. It needs to be managed by the school. The school's responsible for ensuring they've got that good order and discipline in place. But it is a really difficult situation to manage, both for the school and for the community. I think in terms of what can we do, I think it's really important that children and young people know how they can raise their concerns and have a response. I think that, you know, one of the things we can do is make sure that children and young people are clear on that, and that's something that Ofsted checks when they go into schools to say, do children know how they can legitimately raise their concerns and have them responded to? Do families know how to do that? You'll know that the council doesn't have a role to play in school complaints anymore. So the complaints process is usually through the school's complaints process and then directly onto the Secretary of State. So it's a very clear complaints process. So when we get a complaint from a parent, it is not for us to investigate schools and to report back to that parent. That is not something that schools have a process themselves for investigating those complaints. Parents can complain to Ofsted, and they can complain through various other means, which again are publicised on our website. In terms of the well-being issues, which I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Whittington, they're at the heart of what we would be worried about. In terms of our response, I think we have a really strong wellbeing offer to children and young people. We did a lot of training with our teachers. We have an emotional wellbeing pathway online. We have online counselling services. We've got the mental health in schools pilots. We've got our Healthy Minds Lincolnshire. And our schools engage really well in all of those processes. What I can't tell you is how much that individual school uses these processes. But certainly what we can do is give you a brief if you're meeting with the school so that you're aware of all those services and you can share them with the schools, because that gives children who do feel they're struggling for various reasons an opportunity to seek support outside of the school environment as well, which some young people tell us is a really helpful way to get that support. In terms of some of those other the issues that you've referred, they are school-led decisions, so how they organise their bathrooms is a school-led decision, and schools make decisions that they think are best for their community, and that's what their governing body, their trustees, is elected to do, and it's what the head teacher is paid to do. So I don't think the council would have a role in how they were choosing to organise things like that.
Thanks, Heather.
Very briefly, Councillor Whittingham.
I think yes. If you could give me some kind of briefing before the meeting, just so I can just talk and make sure that the school are aware that all this help and support is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews, I believe you have a second question.
Thank you, I do, and I do apologise for asking a second question, but Councillor Cleaver, as ever, asks really good questions and he intrigues me. So on the number of assurances returned for 2021-2022, I went back and had a look at whether 80% was a fair figure. And, you know, that little paragraph there throws up some questions about numbers. One of the questions is, what's the definition of the independent sector? Because looking at those numbers where issues have been made and returns have been made, it doesn't align with the number of schools at primary and secondary within Lincolnshire. So that's one question. But the one that bothered me most in the light of the news that's all around is early years nurseries returns, where total 80% return sounds really good, doesn't it? It's 4 out of 5. And there were no returns from the private sector, private settings, no data available for private independent provision. And that strikes me as, if you like, a misrepresentation. So 80% sounds fantastic, but in fact we're not looking at a lot of sectors where we probably should be, because there may well be issues appearing in all of those sectors, particularly in the early years. So I'm just questioning the numbers in there. But Councillor Cleaver, thank you, you've raised a really good point there. 80% does not represent the assurance we can have from the returns on those settings.
Heather, you wish to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. I think that the bit we do have to keep emphasising about this is it is voluntary, it's not a statutory return. Some of them work with other organisations, so some schools and settings work with other organisations and do returns that are privately commissioned. So they don't have to work through this process. The fact that voluntarily we've got significant uptake within our school sector, and by independent we mean, and I'm just going to look, it's the private sector. It's not academies. Academies are within the other group as well. You're right that in terms of nursery schools, we've only got, it is a school-led survey currently, and we've only got 5. So that we've only got 5 nursery schools that could respond to that. But what I would say is, as a head teacher, and you know, interestingly, we've got some head teachers in the room today, going through the process of the return is useful in itself, because as you work through that process, it's checking in terms of, have you got your policies and procedures in place? Have you got everything you need? And usually for governing bodies, it's really helpful as well, because it's another check that the school's got things in place. So we can take these comments, but I guess the schools that are doing it because they find it useful, not because they think the partnership needs to know what they're doing. They're doing it because they think it's useful, and they think it's useful for an overview. So whilst we'll do all we can to drive it up, it absolutely is voluntary, and it's there to provide us a level of assurance. In terms of the independent sector, you know, again, I would agree with Chris. They have very different reporting mechanisms. They're not used to reporting to the council, so it's not something that's very natural for them to do. And we'll continue to promote the availability of that evaluation with them. But you know, I think it's about being honest that this is a survey that lots of local authorities don't necessarily do. It's something we put in additionality, and a lot of schools are engaging with it and finding it useful.
Thank you, Chris. You wish to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from Heather's comments, I've worked in Nottingham City and in Derbyshire as well as an independent chair, and we didn't used to do this in those areas. Lincolnshire is quite unique in a way. It's something that it's trying to strengthen its assurance. This is an initiative trying to strengthen its assurance without any statutory regulatory power. So we are relying on the schools to actually give us this information, but as Heather says, we can't make them. So I do take your point on numbers and figures and percentages, but the key message I think we're trying to give today is there has been an improvement in the last 12 months, and we will strive to try and improve again in the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm conscious we have a very full agenda this morning, and I obviously don't want to stifle debate, but I believe all members have asked a question, apart from our church representative, Mr. Kyle. So Mr. Kyle will be the final question. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. I will be speedy. Just to say, in terms of impacts, I really appreciate the report from Chris and Stacey. I really appreciate things like the 6-year training pathway, the policies that support schools in safeguarding are absolutely superb. As a head teacher as well, I find safeguarding teams really accessible for us to access and support and ask questions. Training like reducing parental conflict, really supported by our pastoral team at school recently. Just to celebrate that figure from the school safeguarding insurance, moving from 66 to 80% is a real achievement. So well done to the team for that. One thing that just stuck with me around the school safeguarding audit, we have a great online tool that's moved to, I think, a Word document as it transits to another system. So it'd be interesting to get an update, maybe in due course, as to whether that's going to move back online or whether it stays as a Word document. And the final point, just to champion Catherine Smith at the Stay Safe Partnership, the work she heads up with her team, the things commented within the report, like a date with Dan, I think are exceptional in supporting families, and lots of families do take that up. I think it'd be interesting to see the figures of engagement. It'd be interesting to see whether this is an opportunity to engage and support families in a different way like this. We're talking about online safety now. What if we talked about other topics, and whether the team has considered other areas like bedtime routines, home first aid, other areas that could be covered in this format if families are engaging. Thank you.
Heather, did you wish to respond as well as Chris?
Stacey first.
Stacey.
No, I was just going to say thank you for the comments, and I'll make sure that we do pass that back to Catherine. I know they continue to review the input based on kind of what schools are saying and what's coming through from sort of either thematics or what's kind of relevant and kind of what's very topical. So they do try and tailor it. So we can definitely feed that back, and I'm sure that it will grow as kind of the needs of the children change as well. Thank you.
Heather.
Yeah, thanks. And with regard to the online safeguarding form, it is progressing, but because the provider that we were using previously has ceased providing, we need to go through a process within the council, because obviously it sits within a whole myriad of other IT resources, so we need to make sure that we've got all the approvals in order to implement that seamlessly.
Thanks very much. If I can now remind members of the actions required of us as a committee, we've been invited to review and comment on the work and function of the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children Partnership and seek assurance of the activity of the partnership to safeguard and promote the welfare of children in Lincolnshire. I therefore propose that the committee has received and been assured of the work of the partnership to safeguard and promote the welfare of children in Lincolnshire, and that we receive a further annual update in April 2024. And a number of comments have been made, and I know they've been recorded by Tracy for passing on. So can you please raise your hand if you agree with that proposal? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank Chris and Stacey for your very full presentation and answering the questions this morning. And please feel free to leave the meeting if you wish.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I thank your members for some very interesting questions and challenging questions, which is a very healthy environment as far as I'm concerned. So thanks to the committee for their support in scrutinising the Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Thank you.
We will now move on to item 6 on the agenda today, which is the proposal for Falstow Community Primary School to become a voluntary controlled church school, and it's the final decision. This item is for pre-decision scrutiny prior to a decision by the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration on the 10th of March 2023. And therefore I'd like to invite Matthew Clayton, Interim Head of Capital Reform and Education Sufficiency, who is attending to present this report, but also welcome to Jonathan Grant, Head Teacher of Falstow Community Primary School, and Paul Thompson, Director of Education at the Diocese of Lincoln, who are also in attendance for this item. So it's over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. This is quite an unusual proposal. It's very rare that a request is made to change an LA-maintained community school to a voluntary controlled church school. However, as set out in the report, there are good reasons why this has been proposed in this instance. Not only is it to formalise what is already in place in many ways, but it also resolves a long-standing site issue, land issue, should I say. The buildings, and more importantly the land the school sits on, are actually owned by the Lincoln Diocesan Trust. Any school on that site under the requirement of the agreement should technically be a church school. At present, that's not the case. There is actually no record of how that occurred or how or why the original school ceased to be a church school, but it's thought to go back over 100 years. The school itself actually dates back to around 1863, and conversion to church school status would rectify this long-standing issue. In addition to resolving the site anomaly, it also provides the opportunity to formalise what is effectively already in place in practice. Falstow might not technically be a church school, but in many ways it already is one. It's federated with North Coates Primary School, which is a church school. It shares the same ethos and values. It shares the same head. Jonathan is here today as the executive head across both schools. As a Church of England school, it would have a religious character, but it would not be a faith school. So the school would continue to be fully inclusive for the whole community, serve all children regardless of their faith, academic ability, race, gender. The parents, pupils and staff would actually see no difference in the day-to-day school life, same uniform, same staff, same curriculum, admissions policy and governance. However, behind the scenes, the school would benefit from the added scrutiny and support of the Diocesan Board of Education, and should the school potentially look to academise at some point in the future, then options would be open to them that perhaps wouldn't be at the moment due to the land and site situation. The process for implementing this proposal is quite an extensive one for what on the face of it does not result in much of a change. Due to the Academies Act and school organisation regs, it's necessary to follow a very formal and quite detailed process to enable this change to take place. It requires the school to actually close and then immediately reopen. One can't happen without the other, so those two processes must be followed, and they have been followed. That process involved informal consultation with a wide range of interested parties. That was later followed up by a more formal consultation and representation period before getting to this point here today where we're looking at the final decision which needs to be taken. Through the consultation, there were 7 responses formally received. 4 of those were in favour, 3 against the proposal. Of those that were against the proposal, they generally focused on the understanding that it would become a faith school rather than a church school, and that it would only focus on one faith or a single set of beliefs, which is not actually the case. The proposal is to become a church school which would educate about all faiths, seek to serve the whole community, and it's about being fully inclusive still as it is already. Pages 71 and 72 of the report go into a bit more detail of that, should you want more details, and I hope that gives some sufficient assurance that pupils will be educated and supported in the same way that they are now. The final stage, as I mentioned, as the decision maker, is for the LA to decide whether or not to implement the proposal. The recommendation in the report is obviously to approve the proposal, which would take effect on the 1st of September of this year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much, Matt. But before I open it up to questions, would Mr. Grant and Mr. Thompson like to add any comments? You're most welcome to do so.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if at this stage you would like me to talk about the additional support that the diocese can offer the school, or that might be a question that comes later, but I'm willing to talk about that at some stage.
I think that would be useful, because that might be a question at the back of some members' minds, actually. Yeah,
okay.
Do.
Okay, so thank you very much. So if Falstow does convert to a church school, it will have access to the expertise of the diocesan education team. It will have access to the diocesan network of 141 church schools across the diocese, and it will also have access to the National Church of England Education Office. I think it's really important to acknowledge that the support we give will not duplicate the support from the local authority or teaching schools. It will complement it. The diocese already works very closely with the local authority with all of those schools, and we also ensure that the support is very well coordinated. So we're not there to overwhelm the school with support it doesn't need. From the diocese, we'll be able to provide a range of support services and training. We'll be able to support the school to develop its vision further, its values, the quality of religious education and the wider curriculum. We'll be able to support the school develop its collective worship, and we'll be able to provide leadership support for governors, for senior leaders and subject leaders. We work closely with the local authority to recruit head teachers. Not that we need one at this stage, but that's what we do. We'd also be able to, if it was a church school, the diocese would be able to provide some small grants along the way to help it develop its ethos, develop its character. And we talked earlier about Lincoln Cathedral and the events that happen there. Well, if Fulstow was a church school, it would be invited to all the diocesan events, such as the Church School Festival, the Carol Service in the Lincoln Cathedral, which are really fabulous events for children to engage in. We'd be at hand as well to provide pastoral support during those difficult times, and we can provide access to high quality courses and conferences with national speakers. The school would also be able to access specialist reviews and audits in relation to developing its ethos, its governance, its leadership, its quality of education. And as a church school, the school would be subject to church school inspections, known as the SIAMS inspection, and the diocesan education team would help it prepare for those inspections. And we have a very good success rate in ensuring that the schools get at least good in those inspections. I think 98% of our schools are at least good in church school inspection. We'd also offer additional support alongside the local authority with Ofsted and preparing for Ofsted inspections. We have Ofsted inspectors and church school inspectors on the diocesan education team. As I mentioned earlier, in the diocese we have 141 schools. We have oversight of all of those schools, so we're well placed to signpost Fulstow to other good practice and also share the good practice that's at Fulstow with schools, so there'll be that collaborative partnership that we can develop. We visit each of those schools and we would visit Fulstow as well with health checks and identify and celebrate the strengths at that school, promote the school in the community and make recommendations for further development. At a national level, we have the Church of England Education Office. They provide excellent support, guidance and training. They do all what they call the MPQs, the qualifications for leadership, and the school will be able to access all of those. And it provides, the National Church provides guidance on legal matters and resourcing on leading an effective church school. So hopefully that gives you a flavour. On our website you'll see lots of resource, lots of training, lots of guidance, lots of opportunities for Fulstow to engage in should it become a church school. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that comprehensive report. Mr. Grant, did you wish to add anything?
Just to reiterate the fact that there is not going to be that much change, really. The curriculum will still remain the same. It will still go through its usual monitoring and evaluating process so that it's always tailored towards the children that are in the school at present. There'll be no narrowing of the curriculum at all, and there'll be no change in any policies as such. They won't be selective. They will remain exactly the same as they are.
Thanks very much. Councillor Whittington, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before I sort of guess my question, excuse me, I'm on the local parochial church council in the village that I represent, Parish Council representative on it, and I've just been asked to become the PCC's school governor. At local village schools, I'm just going through the process. I'm also a member of SACRE in Lincolnshire as well. So I know from that work that really becoming a Church of England school in terms of, you know, it's not an environment where Christianity is pushed, you know, because, you know, and through Sacre and through the religious education curriculum, all faiths are taught. And again, you know, so I've got no problems with that, but I'm looking at some of the comments that some of the parents, obviously, I've been making from pages 69 through to sort of 71, and they are raising some concerns which they, I would imagine, think are perfectly legitimate concerns to raise. Now, I know that a lot of what they're saying, because of my work through Sacre and the PCC, I know that a lot of the stuff they're saying here won't happen. But they've still got those concerns. So I'm just wondering what you can do to engage with the parents to say, look, you know, okay, we recognise you've got these concerns, they're legitimate concerns, but actually that's not in reality what's going to happen. What you can do to get the message across that actually, you know, none of their fears here will actually be realised. So in effect, I'm kind of speaking, you know, asking how you can reassure the parents. I myself am fine with it, but how would you reassure those parents who are raising these concerns that actually there are safeguards in place, that all faiths are taught equally in Lincolnshire schools, and no one faith is pushed ahead of the rest? Thanks.
Thank you. I think it just comes down to what we have been doing anyway, is continuing being as open and transparent about everything as we can and communicating that message that if we do convert, we will not be a faith school, we will be open to all faiths or religions. And so I think we did offer an open question and answer session to which absolutely nobody came. We still continued, though, with allowing people to email questions in, and again, I don't think we had anything from that either. So I think it's just a case of it will take time for people to see that there is no changes, but it's about us consistently communicating that message out as best we possibly can.
Mr. Thompson used to come in as well.
Yeah, and just to add to Jonathan's view there, I think a good way to reassure parents is to invite the parents in to see exactly what's happening into the school. So collective worship, for example, it is invitational, it's inclusive. If they come in and see collective worship, they'll see that everybody is valued and everybody is welcome. If they see how the curriculum is being delivered, if they go into the classrooms, and they'll see actually there's no changes planned. And if they go into religious education, as you know, being part of Sacre, the school will continue to follow the locally agreed syllabus for RE, where there's an exploration of all the faiths, and they can see that it is genuinely an inclusive environment where not one faith is being pushed. You know, the job of the church school is not to increase church attendance or anything like that. It is simply to enable all pupils to flourish. And if they come into school, and I know that you welcome parents into the school, they will see that for themselves.
Oh, Councillor Mrs. Bradwell used to comment.
Say that this happened in, well, I don't represent that area now, actually Rob represents that area, but there was a school, Walcott and Martin, and Mrs. Mary King's is a church school and Walcott wasn't, and Walcott lost a head teacher, so they decided to merge, and the same questions were asked actually, but actually those two schools have thrived together, and we've been able to maintain two primary schools in two villages, whereas we all know if one starts to go wither on the vine, you know, we would have ended up with one school. So I do think it is an issue probably for a start for parents, but actually there is, I know for a fact, 'cause I was a governor at Mrs. Mary King's as well when it was all happening, and it does work, and you're quite right what you're saying, Paul and Jonathan, that you know, the two schools, you know, we all, in every school you will do some part of religious education, but obviously I know in a church school they do focus more on the assemblies and that, on it being a religious service. So, but I can understand where parents are coming from, but just to reassure people in the committee today, definitely I've been through that, and actually I think the parents do have confidence once it's happened, and you start to embed it all in, and it's only a positive story for those two schools, because today they would not be two schools because they wouldn't have been able to manage their budgets. Sharing a budget and that has really helped.
Thanks very much. Councillor Whittingham, briefly, if you wish to come back.
Yeah, thanks. As I said, because I understand these issues, I've got no problems. But I've been reassured by what you said, and I think I agree with Jonathan. And it's about engagement, you know, about being open and saying, you know, you come in, look at the school, check the process, and just give that reassurance to parents. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. When I was reading the report, I mean, I've heard some of the things today which perhaps leads me to have more assurance, but in reading the report, I was looking at trying to figure out what the difference is between a church school and a faith school, and how faith isn't pushed. And I was reminded back to when my son was really small, and he wanted to go to the same youth club as other people, his friends went to, which was run by a faith group, and they said they didn't push religion. And I asked him how the night went on his first night. He said it was great. There was nothing to do with religion at all. In fact, the main thing they did was they played musical chairs, and there was 4 chairs called Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, which seems to be lost on him, but not lost on me. What this is leading me to really is, and I can see the benefits, and I can understand, and I haven't got a problem with it. I haven't got a problem with church schools at all. But I'm trying to figure out why. So from the diocese, you're saying all this is put in place and all the rest of it. Like, I mean, this is scrutiny is for people that are cynics at times, and I'm just trying to get to that point, is if there's going to be no change and it doesn't benefit at all anyway with regards to faith, which is obviously what the diocese is about, then why is the diocese involved?
Heather, did you wish to come in?
Yeah, thank you. So it is an unusual proposal for us, and Councillor Bradwell's talked about one other occasion. So currently what we have is a school that is sat on church land that was expected to be a church school. It can therefore not formalise relationships with other schools because the land doesn't sit in the same way as other schools sit. So just to be really clear, if this was a council school, it could choose to join a trust or choose not to join a trust. If it chose to join a trust, the council would sign over the land on a 99-year lease. The church schools have a different arrangement and follow a different pathway because it's church land. This school is split between 2 different processes. It is a small school. It may in the future want to work as part of a bigger group. The government's ambition is that all schools will work as part of a bigger group. That will always be a barrier to this school because it is neither on council land nor is it a church school. So it doesn't follow any of those processes. So as well as all of the benefits that have been articulated, it does mean the school's return to its original intention and therefore has a pathway around choice for governance and leadership.
Thanks very much. Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pardon me. I have no problem with the recommendation that's made. The paperwork's very clear on what the issue is and why it needs to be resolved. So I'm absolutely happy with that. I would just comment that it has exposed a gap in my knowledge about the role of the local Anglican diocese in the education of our children. So I would welcome any future briefings or to know more about how that works and what takes place in future. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's an interesting point, Councillor Cleaver. I think a note has been made of that. Thank you. Councillor Sear, I believe you're the last questioner.
I own for it because I am church warden in my village. And I used to sit on school governance for Catholic school in Yorkshire. But my concern is when we come, because in my village used to be a church school, now the coast down is a house now. So no church, belong to ER, not Church England school anymore. It's good new to have something coming because these days the new generation need to learn more about the faith. But all these schools now, they don't against any faith. Anybody can attend, you know, because you have majority, how many Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian can apply to enter the school. But my concern is become the diocese, finally the diocese decided, don't want to do anymore, then become to, like in my village, it become economy. And the children there never know about the church. They visit our local church, they're so happy, but we got no church. So it's good. I will support it. I think it's good, but I don't want the future before to become privacy, not the diocese decide to sell it like in my village. The school is gone. The no church school is gone. It's a house. That's my concern.
Thank you. Who's going to respond? Oh, Matthew.
I can assure you that not a process anyone ever wants to go through school closure, but it is a decision for the local authority. It's not one for the diocese. So even if the diocese did own the buildings and wanted to close it and sell it as a house, they couldn't do that. It comes through us. We are the decision maker. We have to go through an extensive process before we get anywhere near to that conversation. So I can assure you that it's not as straightforward as that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt. As we have no further questions, Mr. Kyle.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just to say, of course, I'm the church representative here, just to point that out, but just to share that within the report, it looks fairly balanced in terms of 4 for and 3 points for against. It talks about on page 82, there's clear harmony between the head teacher and the governing body in terms of next steps. On page 84, it talks about the serving of all faiths and none. And then just to kind of share personal experience of our own school, when I first joined that school, we were 8 years ago as a non-church new head joining the scheme. I benefited from all the support of the diocese and the local authority. Requires improvement at the time and been on a journey. Through that journey, we've had pupils of all faiths and none join our school, including from our local mosque. The imam's children join our schools, which is great, celebrating. Just kind of underlines the service church schools do to all faiths and none. And that we really benefited through that and got a strong good off the back of that. And that is down to the support of the local authority and the diocese. And my question to the diocese is to just ask, can we be assured that that support will be given to Fulstow as well and Northcote as they continue to flourish in this partnership?
Most definitely.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Just to recap on the actions required of us, we've been invited to consider the attached report and to determine whether the committee supports the recommendation to the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration as set out in the report, and agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The recommendation to Councillor Mrs Bradwell is set out on page 62 of the agenda and is as follows. That the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration approves the proposal for Fulstow Community Primary School, Fulstow, to become a church school with effect from the 1st of September 2023. The comments from the committee's discussion on this report have been recorded by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, to be passed on to Councillor Mrs Bradwell, and I think we've had a number of interesting comments made this morning. I therefore propose that we support the recommendation. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Whittington. Thank you very much. We'll now vote on this item. You are voting on whether you support the recommendation to the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration, and agree to provide the additional comments to the Executive Councillor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That is carried. Finally, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank our guests, Mr Grant and Mr Thompson, for attending today and for answering the questions, and I hope you found it an interesting experience. Thanks very much, and you may now, of course, leave. Thank you. That's it. now move on to item 7, which is the cost of living increase for foster carers. This item is for pre-decision scrutiny to a decision by the Executive Council for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration between the 20th and 31st of March 2023. And I'd like to welcome Deborah Crawford, Head of Service, Fostering, Adoption and Leaving Care, who is attending today to present this report. So it's over to you, Deborah.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. The report that is contained within your pack, which I'm sure everybody's had ample opportunity to read and digest and reflect upon, relates to the cost of living increase for foster carers within Lincolnshire County Council. As outlined, this report addresses the proposed cost of living increase for fostering allowances, and it captures the recent announcement by government of a 12.4% uplift uplift to the national minimum allowances to be paid for foster carers. And I think it's important that I raise at this juncture that that money has been included within the local government financial settlement or finance settlement for 23-24 in its most part. I think and I hope that within the report it highlights that Lincolnshire as a fostering service provide a strong core offer. We are a fostering first authority. We have a very clear practice and strategy which values and supports our fostering households. And our ambition and aspiration is that children have their best lives, achieve and secure good outcomes. As a responsible corporate parent, we want to ensure that our volunteer workforce, and I use the word volunteer because it's with people's hearts and commitment that they arrive at the point of wanting to become an approved foster carer. And it's important that those people are supported in an emotional, financial and moral aspect to meet the basic needs of children that they're caring for that are not their own. And I think that this report and the proposal by, or the decision by central government, is to ensure that foster carers are able to afford and manage the basic costs of meeting the needs of the children they care for. I think the report reflects that we are a value for money and cost-effective service, that we demonstrate to carers that and to children in Lincolnshire that we provide them with local placements, and we ride on the back of the branding of local people for local children. I don't need to go into the huge benefits that there are for those individual children who find themselves in care, but I think acknowledging that they're local within their own communities and within their own culture is something that we value and is very important in terms of their upbringing and minority, to get them to a point where they're able to contribute to wider society. I must say, and some people who are familiar in the room to me, foster carers is fostering is a passion, and I think we have to acknowledge these are an incredible group of people from diverse backgrounds with varied experiences, and we entrust the children in care in Lincolnshire into their individual care. Often those children have experienced harm and trauma, but actually these households afford them a further experience of family life, where they open up their hearts and their homes to these children. And I think what is very evident in the report that's been prepared for today is a large proportion of children who are in care are in the care of Lincolnshire foster carers, and it's something that we absolutely celebrate. Fostering is kind of the bedrock really in some respects, and that's the word I use in terms of the provision for our children in care. So actually affording those children the opportunity of living family life is absolutely crucial and beneficial. It's a critical part of the council's ability to care for children, and growing our stocks, maintaining these volunteers is absolutely crucial to individual children, but strategically in discharging our corporate parenting responsibilities. I think considering and approving this uplift will assist the council in maintaining our core offer it is a very, very competitive marketplace out there. And, you know, it's important that we, you know, retain fostering households and, you know, concert our maximum efforts really to attract and retain foster carers. You know, given the ever-increasing gap between the number of children nationally who are now cared for by local authorities and the drop-off of people who want to become foster carers, there is a bigger gap than what there ever has been. And I think that my experience of being in a regulated service for 10 years now and in the council for 30 years is that, you know, our ambitions to recruit and retain foster carers has never been at its highest, you know, it's at the highest point really. And I think that hopefully the report echoes the sentiment of the service that these are valuable people and that in light of the government's minimum proposal, I've politely requested that we consider this and afford an uplift to all our foster carers across the county of Lincolnshire. Very happy to take some questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm sure all members would agree with me that our foster carers are very important and very much valued by this council. And we're grateful we have so many foster carers, as this means we do not rely on independent fostering agencies as much as some other authorities might have to. I'd like to invite members of the committee to comment on the report. I do have Councillor Whittington, I believe, first to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Not really a question, but just to wholeheartedly support the report from Deborah. As Deborah mentioned, the foster carers are the bedrock of our sort of, corporate parenting responsibility. And again, just to remind all county councillors, all 70 of us, are all corporate parents. We have the responsibility for these looked after children. And yeah, I mean, foster carers are doing valuable work. I mean, myself and my wife, we didn't foster, we adopted about 20 years ago from Lincolnshire. And I think it's fair to say when we were going through the process, you doing some of the training, you read about some of the levels of trauma and neglect that some of these children have experienced in their young lives when they're taken into care. And it's really because it's those first few months and few years of life where all the foundation blocks of building bonds with parents and stuff, are built up. And for an awful lot of the looked after children, those just weren't in place or have been knocked down or whatever. And I can't compliment our foster carers more. As Deborah says, they do a fantastic job. And I know, sort of post-COVID, there's a challenge now to identify some new ones, and we need to understand, the very, very vital role they do play. And they're going to be facing cost of living increases just like everybody else, which I think the government has recognised with the 12.4% increase. The money has been given to us, the funds are there, it's in the budget. I just encourage all members to support this and to really value the incredible work our foster families do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have some fantastic foster parents who don't do this for the money, but as well as the support that we give as a county, I think it's important that we make sure that they can afford to keep doing this. So as Chairman of Corporate Parenting, I fully support this and hope the members do as well.
Thanks very much. Deborah, you wish to comment? Okay, not at this stage. Councillor Smith, I believe you have a question.
I do, thank you, Chairman. Deborah, you said we were the gap between the foster carers we have and the number we need is going in, shall I say, the wrong direction, not for the lack of quality of foster carers we have. What is the gap? And are there any areas in Lincolnshire where it's particularly acute? So the gap is larger in, say, I don't know, say in the central Lincoln state to, say, my part of the world, which is Rothwell and Nettleton and around that part of the world. Is there a specific area where it's larger, or is it just generally across the piece where we're simply, unfortunately, as some have retired and gone out the profession, we're not able to recruit for one reason or another?
Okay, thank you. Nationally, the backdrop is that we are in the region of 9,000 households short across the country. In terms of looking at the demographic in Lincolnshire, you're absolutely right in terms of we've lost some foster carers owing to age changes, personal circumstances. There is no one area in the Lincolnshire boundary, and what I would say is that we actually don't just recruit within the Lincolnshire kind of boundaries as such, because we have foster carers that are well beyond Lincolnshire as well. But interestingly, our media and marketing approach is across the piece of Lincolnshire. There are no kind of isolated pockets where we're struggling. We would always like more, of course, and our campaigns are very much about inclusivity of people and having a diverse workforce. So there are no pockets, but we spread ourselves far and wide to reach out to everybody from every background and every part of Lincolnshire.
Thanks very much. Councillor Cleaver, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm more than happy to accept officers' recommendations on this issue, and I'm really glad that we've got the money to do it. I mean, I think that's something we should celebrate. 12.4% is a good figure to see. To be honest, let's not be shy about saying that. But in terms of the fund, I mean, in terms of good scrutiny, every scrutiny paper we get says what's the alternatives to doing something. So we've been given this 543 million, which I presume doesn't have to be given back if we don't spend it. It's not that sort of government grant, is it? It's there. We've given it. We've got it. What actually are the alternatives ways of spending that money? How could it be spent otherwise, or shared otherwise on something else? I mean, again, this is just. I'm not questioning the judgment of officers. I'm just wondering what the alternatives would be, quite simply.
Councillor Bradwell, I believe you wish to come in.
I'll come in. Well, I think my advice would be that we would want to invest it in foster carers, because we know that young people thrive in a family home. Not saying that the children who are in residential homes don't thrive, but we know in a family environment, it's like our own. I know they're not our own children, but we know when we grew up ourselves. If you're living, and the couple who are looking after the children, sometimes they get that family love and attention. Although they've got their own mum and dad, and they will have visits to see them and their brothers and sisters. It's the fact that these young people, we believe it's a better way of young people growing up in that family environment, whereas in a residential home, as I say, it isn't quite the same. Although our young people are settled there, I'm not saying they aren't. Some young people do thrive in a residential home. But for me, if we don't give this uplift, we know with all the cost of living and that, these people, as Deborah said, their vocation is looking after these children. And they wouldn't be able to actually do the job if we weren't actually helping them more. We all know how our fuel bills and that have gone up. And very often, the couple, sometimes one of them will work. In the majority of cases, they're both there looking after the children. So I believe that, the government have given this money for foster carers, and I do believe that that's what we should do to be able to maintain the foster carers that we've got. Because, as I say, and actually, we often meet with foster carers and that, and it probably would be an idea for if other members are interested to do that, because actually listening to, what they do and that is really, it pulls your heartstrings really. So yes, so that's all I want to say. I'm very committed, like Stephen is, but I think that's because we're a bit closer to what they do than other members.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting suggestion you make, Councillor Bradwell, and I think that's been noted. Heather, did you wish to say something?
Yeah, just to say thank you very much, Councillor Cleaver. So I think the risks are, if we don't increase this is the national recommendation, these foster carers could go and provide foster caring for independent agencies, and then we'd have to commission them with the 12% plus the agency fee on top. We could buy residential places. We would get not very many for the amount of money that we're spending here. And I think, you know, it's right to explore it, but I absolutely, and I think you're in agreement as well, Councillor Cleaver, this is absolutely the recommendation is, we've had this national announcement, we knew our foster carers were beginning to raise concerns before we had the announcement, we were delighted to get the announcement, delighted to have the funding, and we should allocate it to the foster carers.
Councillor Cleaver, you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you for that, and thank you for the replies from Councillor Bradwell and Heather. Just as a point of information, really, for me, what was the similar figure for last year, firstly? And secondly, do we have any other financial incentives to retain our foster carers over and above the allowance that they get?
Okay, happy to answer that. Last year we were in a position where we gave an uplift of 2%. And in terms of financial incentives, we do foster care households do get a retention fee, but also they are supported with a financial incentive if they can nominate somebody they know. So we use our foster carers with their absolute permission, consent and willingness to help us recruit new foster carers. So they get a very small enhancement for that. Most people do it not for money. So if that answers your question, Councillor Cleaver, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sear, I believe you have a question.
Yes, congratulations. I give my heart and soul to the foster carer in Lincoln. I will support it, but how the council support our foster care and anything more the council can do. But I think, like, people not in for the money, they're in because they care. But at the moment, everything not cheap. So if you not, you know, up percentage, we lose it. And the children, the person who suffered it, the children who needs foster. So very important, I think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sear. Money is a part of it, and I think alongside the fostering families, the fostering service and the council as a greater good. We always put children at the forefront of everything that we do and we think about. We have a very strong kind of strengths-based approach to matching children and foster carers, which kind of helps us achieve putting the right children with the right people at the right time. So there's a number of various considerations and assessments and using the Value and Care Toolkit and a number of things that we do to make sure that we can put the right children in the best place. The support and supervision, obviously there are regulations about what social workers have to do and when they have to do it with fostering households, including fostering households, birth children as well, because they're an important part of the overall kind of oversight and management and support. We support our foster carers from the point of view that they pick up the telephone or go onto the website and express their interest. So they're budded all the way through from the point of interest all the way through to approval and beyond. And we've got foster carers in this county that have been with us 20, nearly 30 years. So I think that's a bit of a testament about what we do and what we do well. Support comes in different shapes and sizes. Some of it is in relation to the buddy, having somebody who's doing fostering to teach you what to do and support you through those difficult times. We have a strong social media and face-to-face offer of support within their home or in the community. We have online groups. We have a training and development plan. We have and promote the engagement with other services such as the virtual school, health and other parts of education. We offer therapeutic support to foster carers to help them understand the trauma and the experience of the child or children they're caring for. It goes on and on. What we've done this year is we have ensured that all fostering families within the county of Lincolnshire are able to get the staff the same as the staff benefit, whilst recognising they're not staff, but they have the perks and privileges that we as employees of Lincolnshire County Council do. And we've also, for those people that are familiar, have subscribed every household to the Blue Light offer, which enables foster carers and foster families to have their own card secure, savings at lots of high street stores, lots of supermarkets and various kind of activities for children. So I would say that our hub of support, if you like, has different levels to it. And I think that our retention suggests that we do lots very well. But we obviously had to respond to the increased costs and the economic climate that we're in. And, you know, hence this paper that's here today.
Did you wish to come back briefly?
Thank you very much. I wish I were younger. You can foster me then. It sounds very good to me. It sounds very good to me. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think, Deborah, that you can see that you and your team and our foster carers have the full support of this committee. If I can now move on to the actions required of us, we've been invited to consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendation to the Executive Council for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration as set out in the report, and also to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. And the recommendation to Councillor Mrs Bradwell is set out on page 103 of the agenda pack and is as follows: that the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety, Procurement and Migration approves the increase of all Lincolnshire's foster care rates by 12.4% from April 2023, in line with the government's increase to the national minimum allowances. Now, the comments from the committee's discussion on this report, I should say, have been recorded by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, and will be passed on to Councillor Mrs Bradwell. I therefore propose that we support this recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Whittington, I think you were first. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That is carried. We'll now have a 10-minute break and resume at about 12:10. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone, and we now move on to item 8 on the agenda, Lincolnshire School Performance 2021 to 22. This item provides an update for us regarding the standards within the sector-led system using performance data from Lincolnshire Schools' national testing and examinations in 2022. And I'd like to welcome Matt Spores, Head of Service for School Standards, who will be presenting the report. So it's over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully members have had a chance to read through the report and digest the information in there. So I'd just like to pick out a few key points. Starting with Key Stage 1, the performance of the schools and settings at Key Stage 1 has remained steady over time, and the gap between national and Lincolnshire has remained steady. We are still slightly below national at Key Stage 1. But moving on to Key Stage 2, what we've seen is that the national performance has dropped post-pandemic, and Lincolnshire's performance has dropped as well. However, the good news is that Lincolnshire's schools have performed slightly better on average than national in terms of the drop. So whilst we're still slightly below national, we have closed the gap slightly on the national performance at Key Stage 2. Another piece of positive news at Key Stage 2 is that our children with education, health and care plans are performing better than their peers nationally, both in terms of attainment and progress at Key Stage 2. So that's very positive, certainly in light of the post-pandemic issues that everyone's been facing. At Key Stage 4, again, some positive news. School performance on average in Lincolnshire has increased while the national has remained pretty steady, and that's both for attainment and for progress. So what we now see at Key Stage 4 is that our attainment is in line with national, and we are above our regional and statistical neighbours. We are, however, slightly below our selective area school average for Key Stage 4. And our performance for progress at Key Stage 4 is now slightly above national. It's within a whisker, but it is slightly above, so that's very encouraging. In terms of the performance of groups of children, our disadvantaged children, those with free school meals, are attaining better than their free school meals peers nationally, so that again is some more good news. However, we still do have the gap in attainment and progress with that group compared to their non-free school meal peers. And again, our SEN children do perform slightly better than their peers nationally, as I've said, at Key Stage 4. The performance against Ofsted outcomes, what we're seeing is that we are getting closer to national performance in terms of the number of schools that are good or outstanding. We have had some ups and downs, as the report does indicate, and for both Ofsted and for attainment and progress, we see some variations across districts, which if members would like to ask questions, obviously I'm very happy to answer on that area. So that's what are we going to do? Well, we have a variety of strategies in place to support pupil progress, and we have a shared stakeholder plan with our key partners in the Teaching School Hub, the Lincolnshire Learning Partnership Board, and with the diocese. So I shall leave it there, and Martin and myself will be able to answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks very much, Matt. And questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Why are our selective schools slightly below their competitors in Lincolnshire this time round?
That's a very good question. 90% of our secondary schools are academies, and members will be aware that it's not within our gift as a local authority to intervene with academies, and so whilst we do try and maintain quite good we do have good relationships with the academy sector, it's up to them to drive their performance, although we do include them through the Lincolnshire Learning Partnership Board, and we try and ensure that they're hooked into our leadership briefings, and we offer them support and keeping in touch meetings. However, many of them do very well. Their progress is well above average in most instances, but there have been a couple of schools that have not performed as well as we would hope for, which adjusts the average, which is not necessarily indicative of the whole sector.
Heather, you wish to comment?
Matt, would you, I mean, I wouldn't say it's outside of cohort normal variation, slightly below, in line, slightly above. We do change, in the selective schools, we do change position, and I wouldn't say the change we've seen this time, you know, couldn't be attributed to natural cohort variation.
No, that's absolutely right, Heather, and I think the statistical nature of the areas we're compared with, I think it's fair to say that, well, members may contradict me, but I'm not sure that Buckinghamshire is particularly like Lincolnshire in terms of like with like. But so. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. Did you wish to come in? No. Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the summary at the beginning of the report, whenever I see the term the report uses unvalidated performance data, sort of amber lights start flashing in my head. What does unvalidated data mean in this context, please?
So when we get the first statistical release of school data in and around the end of September, October from the Department for Education, that's unvalidated because schools still have a chance to appeal some of those results and that data, and then it gets crunched again, and then it gets crunched again. And so essentially it's the DFE dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So I think nothing has changed, but as of today, I'm pretty confident the data has been validated, but at the time of writing the report, it was still technically unvalidated by the department.
Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the report. And I acknowledge exactly the point you were taking, that obviously 90% of our schools are academies, and therefore, you know, the performance of those schools is down to the academies, and you know, whatever. So in reality, kind of what influence in driving up standards do we have? I mean, I guess we can point, we can signpost, we can advise, but ultimately, as you said, it's the academy's responsibility.
Thanks, Councillor Whittington, for your question and comment there. I think you're absolutely right to highlight that the system's evolving and adapting, and with the increase in the number of academies, the relationship and duties of a local authority on driving specifically outcomes and school improvement is different. That said, there's a difference between how we work in Lincolnshire in terms of what is our statutory duty and what's in the benefit of children and young people in terms of championing outcomes. And we've heard a lot this morning around good quality relationships, that interconnectivity benefiting the system. So we have a lot of, shall we say, more informal conversations around signposting and directing schools to being able to access support offers and opportunities. We do that for all schools in Lincolnshire, but the subtlety and difference around how to engage and interact with an underperforming or failing school is different between a maintained school and an academy. So a maintained school is very clear in how we can call them into strategy and the levers in which we can implement to seek improvement. On academies, we can have open conversations, but there's no direct route of redress there. So that's when we need to work quite closely with the Regional Schools Commissioner's Office, now called the Regional Director for Education, to be able to ask them to seek and explore the quality of education that's going on within those settings. Overall, though, I mean, we talk a common language. We're doing leadership briefings at the moment with all of our schools, and really the challenges our schools face are similar, irrelevant of structure. So it's about making sure we signpost and target the opportunities to engage in activity for all as regularly as possible. But for us, I think in Lincolnshire, one of the things that we should be really proud of is the fact that we still have open lines of communication with our academies, and more contact myself, contact Matt, not when things have gone wrong, but when they want to have a conversation that isn't a statutory duty, but they want to connect, to kind of make sure that they're doing the right kind of things, engaging in the right kind of opportunities. And that's quite unique, I think, in Lincolnshire.
Thanks very much. Mr. Kyle, I believe you have a question.
Just say thank you for the report, and also just to echo the kind of quality of the team in terms of Matt as a trained Ofsted inspector as well helps schools and provides ad hoc support via emails and things and pick up the phone and whatever. What's great to read in this report on page 117 is the relationship between the LLPB chaired by Catherine Stratton, the Teaching School Hub led by Amanda Griffiths, and the local authority work probably primarily led by Martin Smith and his team. It's great to see that coming together. There's more clarity in the system now than there was when there were lots of teaching schools happening. It's much clearer when there's one teaching school hub and it's all working together. That's great. It talks very positively, this report, around the Lincolnshire Learning Partnership. That's great. Are we confident that's going to continue? Are there changes to funding models going ahead? Or is the funding staying the same and they can still invest in the same way they invested in projects in the future?
Thanks, Martin, for that feedback and comment. And I think you're absolutely right. The coherence in the system around what are the offers, what are the opportunities that actually make a difference to children and young people has definitely become clearer. With regard to future partnerships, I think it's difficult to say how long future partnerships would continue, because we never know what might be the next government announcement around that, but there's definitely a commitment over the next 3 to 4 years around working together to drive those outcomes in the county. The ability to fund is something that we're always going to have to look at, because we always knew that the funds available to the Lincolnshire Learning Partnership were time limited and time specific, but we have still got funds available there that have been committed in principle to a number of projects, which should make a huge difference to some of our young people in certain areas. And I know the board and the Teaching School Hub are constantly reviewing and considering how to make it sustainable. So hopefully that gives you a steer and an update of where we're at the moment.
Thanks very much. Councillor Matthews.
Yes, yes, thank you. It's staggering seeing those arrows shooting down nationally, and it's really good that we've maintained our place and improved it in a time when basically the education has faced such dreadful problems. So well done to all the schools in Lincolnshire. I'm particularly interested in the early years outcomes, which again sort of showed dramatic decline nationally. And I want to be educated, because in the previous discussion we learned that Lincolnshire only has 5 maintained nurseries or schools. So where does this data come from? Is this from every setting in the county? How much of this do we have our hand on, if you like, as Lincolnshire County Council? And is there a variation by region? So in other words, we've seen all these wonderful pictures from our Director of Public Health about the vulnerable communities living on the East Coast, from Mablethorpe down through Sutton, Chapel St Leonard's to Skegness. And of course all that will be smoothed out. So I'd be really interested to know about if you like, the micro, I don't know what the right word is, but I'm really interested in how this correlates to our vulnerable communities and what we're doing to maintain these high standards in our vulnerable communities. I think we've had a set of those pretty coloured maps already today, so I think people understand what I'm asking. That's an education question for me, but can we have a brief summary on early years, please? Thank you.
Heather, you wish to respond?
Yeah, thank you. So the EYFS data is taken at the end of the reception year in school. So it's not the nurseries. It goes across the 2 years. Unless Joe's going to correct me. No, Martin. No, sorry. So it goes across the 2 years. Martin gave a look there and I thought I might have actually got it wrong. So it goes across those 2 years, but it's assessed at the end of the reception year. So it's every school effectively. It's not nursery provision. It does judge that provision, obviously, and it's where you lay the foundations for that result. But it is at the end, so it's across all of our settings. In terms of where we get the data from, the data does come through from the department. We often get early release data on some elements of it, but we don't really get enough consistency to be able to draw significant conclusions through that work. In terms of the can we look at it at a lower level data, within the appendices you've got the district level breakdown. We can go further down than that, so we can go to school level and we can drill down into different elements of it, but I guess it would be what we tend to do is look at clusters and look at different groups of schools, look at districts, look at different types of schools, then look at schools that have got similar characteristics in terms of performance or other elements. And what Martin's team will be doing is analysing that data to say, well, actually, of those programmes that we've got on offer from those groups that we've just discussed, which schools do we want matched up to that offer, and how does because Martin sits on the board across the one plan for education in Lincolnshire, how do we make sure we get the right schools accessing those programmes? And variance within districts can be significant, as it is across Lincolnshire as well.
Thank you for that. I'm pleased that you were so clear on that. I absolutely wasn't clear about where this data was coming from. Can I ask, and perhaps outside this, that I can think of 10 named schools that sit within those dark blue areas of deprivation, and I'd be really interested to know where they're sitting in terms of that early years, so that we know that we're giving them the right springboard and the best help that we can give them through education. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to come back. I really follow up on what Councillor Matthews has just said, because certainly within the division I represent, we've got one local school which sits, and if you sort of look at the indices of multiple deprivation, the primary school sits in sort of the top 20% in the country in terms of, whatever. Whereas another part of my division is in the lowest 10%. So, and there's a primary school in there, so I would be interested in that information as well, to see, the correlation between, and I'm guessing you can link all this data with indices of multiple deprivation and stuff like that, so you can start to see where the cohorts going into schools come from, so you can start to understand some of the social issues and that are there. Thanks.
Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews and Councillor Whittington. I suppose I just wanted to add some further detail around the good level of development and that outcome at the age of 5 years old is to, in schools, we often think of it as the beginning of education, foundation stage reception class, but it's really important to understand that that is a marker of the impact and journey those children have gone through from 0 to 5 through the early years provision. And certainly within that period for this cohort had multiple lockdowns where they were unable to access childcare or educate early years provision because of that. Similar to our school-aged children, but it's worthwhile noting developmentally that has a bigger impact on the youngest children because of a lack of communication and language, social interaction, etc. And so I just wanted to link that to the information that the scrutiny boards heard before around education recovery. The DFE did commit a number of different amounts of money within schools and within different settings to support education recovery post-pandemic, and we won't have seen the impact of that yet until next year. All being well, that impact will be high. We have got initiatives such as the family hubs. We've also got the communication and language development programme, which committed to create over 2,500 almost language experts in the early years provision. So I just wanted to give you that assurance around it. Can look quite concerning, but I think nationally and locally a lot of work's gone into kind of preventing a legacy of that. But I did just want to stress you know, that 0 to 5 agenda is essential, and that was particularly disruptive. I just also want to say to Councillor Matthews as well, thank you for acknowledging the work of the schools, because attendance in Lincolnshire during the pandemic and the lockdowns was well above national compared to other areas. So more children who needed to attend school during those lockdowns were able to do so. And I think that's playing out in some of those outcomes, particularly at Key Stage 4. They were in the building, they were continuing a form of education during that time.
Thanks very much. Matt, did you want to come in?
Thank you, yes. Just to add to what Martin said there, what we see very clearly in the data is that there's a very clear correlation between the levels of deprivation in the surrounding area that a school sits, the percentage of pupils that are disadvantaged or receiving pupil premium. As that number increases, the outcomes of the school decrease. It's a very clear correlation that you know, schools face many challenges to make sure those children get the best education they can. But schools are working very hard. In fact, the district which has the highest proportion of PP children actually has some of the better outcomes in terms of closing the gap. It's the districts with fewer disadvantaged children that actually seem to have less of an impact in closing that gap between disadvantaged and their peers. And just to add to what Martin was saying, we're doing some work through our Teaching School Hub, but using some de-delegated funding released from the Lincolnshire Learning Partnership Board. We've commissioned a project for building on the early language work and early language and reading in the early years to Key Stage 1 transition period. And that piece of work's been going on for a year now, and we've been developing specialist teacher provision to support schools in making sure that that good work continues through. So hopefully in the next year or so we're going to be really seeing the outcome of that as well.
Thanks very much, Matt. If we have no further questions, then I'll move on to what's been required of us as a committee. We've been invited to review and seek assurance on the outcomes for Lincolnshire schools for the academic year 21-22. I therefore propose the committee has reviewed the report and has been assured of the outcomes for Lincolnshire schools for the academic year 2021 to 2022. And we've had another comments which have been recorded and some actions made. So can you please raise your hand if you agree with that proposition? Thank you very much. That is agreed. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, which is service level performance reporting against the success framework 2022 to 23 quarter 3. This item sets out the quarter 3 performance for the service level performance measures in relation to children's services. And I'd like to invite Jo Kavanagh, Assistant Director Early Help, to present the report. So it's over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. As you will see, I think this is the second time that the report has been done in this format, where you're able to see for each performance measure the previous performance and how we benchmark if there's benchmarking information available. That's set out, which hopefully is helpful to the committee. In this report for quarter 3, you will see that there is 1 measure that's exceeded the target, 4 that achieved their target, and 3 that didn't meet the target. They are performance measures that are pretty familiar to the committee now, and rather than go through each one in question, I think we are just to say that we are generally performing really well. There has been some impact from the COVID pandemic on a number of measures, similar to as Martin's outlined, where the current situation is impacting on children and families, but we are still performing really well. In terms of the average time taken to match a child to an adoptive family, you can see that the performance is still really good. During the pandemic, the performance rate was reduced as a result of the delays through the COVID pandemic. So it was previously set at a target of 121, and for this measure, lower is better. But we are still performing really well because of the commitment to identifying and matching children very early at the start of the process so that we continue to perform really well. For our juvenile first-time offenders, the committee are well aware of the work of the Joint Diversionary Panel, having had papers here previously, and from the announcement that Councillor Bradwell made at the start, that really positive work's been recently recognised by our inspectorate. So we are still performing really well nationally, and that measure's very strong. In relation to children in care, again, you can see from the benchmarking data compared to national and our statistical neighbours, despite the impact of the pandemic and some of the challenges that you've heard this morning in relation to the availability of foster carers, etc., we are performing really well in Lincolnshire, and as Deborah outlined to the committee, we have very strong fostering in Lincolnshire. We have the majority of our children in care are placed with our own foster carers. We have strong residential provision, and both prior to children coming into care and once they are in care, there is a very strong commitment to ensuring that experience is really positive. So we have lots of early help and other preventative services that make the difference. We've heard already about the work that schools have done really positively for this cohort of children. So we are able to meet the needs of children early and stop children from coming into care. And then when they do come into care, if it is at all possible, there is a real strong commitment to returning those children to their families wherever that's possible. In terms of children subject to a child protection plan, this is a measure that does fluctuate, and as you'll be aware, this is around where there is significant harm to children, and we have a multi-agency team around that child working through the challenges to increase safety, but the numbers do fluctuate because when there is the risk and need, then we would have a child on a plan. But again, as you can see, we benchmark really strongly with our statistical All England and East Midlands in relation to that target. In relation to the time taken to move a child from care to an adoptive family, this is, as you'll be aware, a 3-year rolling target. So although there have been some improvements, it will take a little while for us to get back in the range of the target. That is going in the right direction, and that's really about as a result of court delays. In terms of juvenile reoffending, I think I've spoken about this numerous times. The impact of the first-time entrant figures reducing means that there is a much smaller cohort of children including within the reoffending target. So the cohort of children has reduced by about 50% in comparison to the previous year. You'll know that this is a target that's done in arrears, so the data is quite old. But as a result of us preventing so many children coming into the criminal justice system, for those that do reoffend, that small cohort has a sort of inadverse impact really in terms of that rate. And then in relation to care leavers in suitable accommodation, we're again performing really strongly and benchmarking really positively. And then in relation to 16 and 17-year-old children in care participating in learning. So we'll be aware that there is some fluctuation in this performance, but I am really pleased to tell you of a piece of work that has been in development for some time, and that is really around targeting our children in care at sort of year 10 and 11 through an initiative that has been implemented through our work with children in special educational needs and disability and through our corporate parenting manager. And so we are increasing a number of job coaches that are available. There'll be a job coach that will be specifically employed to dedicate time and energy to this particular cohort, starting in year 10 and 11, identifying opportunities for work-based work experience and other initiatives to look at other options than the traditional route for this cohort of vulnerable children. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Jo. We have Councillor Whittington and then Councillor Cleaver.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jo, for the report. All my questions are really around adoption. In terms of potential adoptive parents. Could you just, I know it's not strictly within this report, but if you just give me sort of a bit of an update as to where we are in terms of identifying adoptive parents and where we are in terms of that. I'm really pleased to see that the average time to match a child to an adoptive family is improving, because that's really good, because I think, you know, children need that sort of stability. But obviously, for the reasons you sort of explained, to then actually move them to the adoptive families, not achieving the target. And I know you sort of mentioned the delays post-COVID in terms of core delays. But of course, I'm guessing the numbers are, to a certain extent, being skewed by the fact you're using a 3-year rolling average. So I'm just wondering if you could kind of just give me a little bit of a feeling as to where we are now in terms of the courts. You don't have to sort of give exact figures, but just a general feeling as to how you think, if you think that backlog is being addressed and where we are at the moment. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
No problem. Our adoption experts sadly left the room, but I will try my best with those questions. So, yeah, as you've heard already, so in terms of the backlog of cases within the court, we are working very closely in relation to that, and that backlog is clearing, and so those delays are reducing. I think in relation to the average time taken, it will take some time because of that delay to work through, but I think the other thing is that one child in particular can make a real difference to that performance target, and actually that can be for really positive reasons. So there was a situation, for example, if a placement has broken down, then the team are incredibly tenacious, absolutely committed to finding a right match of an adoptive family for a child when in those circumstances. And so if that takes a little while, that can also have an impact on performance, but it's absolutely for the right reason. So just wanted to make that comment that sometimes there are positive reasons why that target isn't as strong as it might be, but certainly the delay should work through, and we should start to see that improving.
Thanks very much. Councillor Cleaver.
Thanks for this, Joe. On the 16, 17-year-olds participating in a learning PI, could you explain why the target went down from 90% to 61% and then pushed back up to 83% or over just 2 quarters? That does look statistically a very odd thing for it to happen to a target. And could I just make a suggestion that when we see these figures in future, that there's a little hyperlink on each of the measures that links us to the technical definition of both how the target's set and how the figures are derived? Because I realise that to put that in the report would make it unnecessarily wordy, but it would be helpful to know exactly what we're looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly on that last point, we can definitely explore that. The reports aren't produced by ourselves in Children's Services, so I'd need to take that away and see what's possible. But yes, certainly that's something we can definitely explore. I think in terms of the fluctuation, I think it is a relatively small number of young people, and things change quite dramatically in the lives of some of these young people. So I think it is somewhere where that does happen, you know, and we can have a situation where a young person is doing really well and very settled, and then something happens and they experience something that may or may not be related to their education and training, but, you know, a factor outside of that then has that impact, and things can change very quickly. It's also a cohort that may move around, move location, and so there are a number of different factors on an individual level which make this quite a changing picture, really. I think is perhaps what I would say about that.
You wish to come back?
Yes, actually, thinking about this, I do have a recollection that last time we looked at this, we did ask for how this measure compares with all 16 and 17-year-olds. So how the figure for those children in care compares with all 16 and 17-year-olds in Lincolnshire. And also the point that really basically amplified what you've said, that of course there is a context in terms of the size of the population on which the percentage is based. If you're only talking about 8 children, clearly 10% of that, it speaks for itself, doesn't it? So it's always helpful I think where relevant, if there is a small population, for that to be noted in the descriptions.
Yeah, we can. I'll take that away, and also in relation to the comparable data, I think it also does vary in relation to where we are in the academic year. So we'd see the performance perhaps to be stronger in September, October, although sometimes there are some delays and some changes in circumstances if young people have come into care over the summer period. But so, you know, in terms of where we are in the academic year can have an impact on that. But yeah, we can make that much clearer in the narrative, and I will take away the question and point about the comparative data.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews, you have a question?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the... I'm an inveterate unmuter. I'm really sorry. And it's found its way into the chamber. I want to thank you for the tenor of the report, because we asked for some backstory to come through. And I think there is some really interesting backstory in here, and I want to talk about it in a moment. I was also interested in, as I am, the 16-17-year-old children in care participating learning, and I was enormously pleased to see that there is an increase in children in care participating learning. But I sat in this chamber and saw another report about the performances of those children participating in learning at GCSE, where, quite frankly, it was abysmal, shocking. Now, at that time, I think literally it was a day or two after Kieran had retired or taken his retirement. So I'd like to thank Kieran for all his work through this committee, because he has set up something absolutely innovative over a period of time, and something that is fantastic. But I would also like us to think about whether we as a county council should now go back and review that service on a change of leadership. I don't know if you've replaced Kieran as a leader, but to make sure that in our partnership working that we've heard so much about, so we know that we're working with Barnardo's, we know that we're working with other partners, we know that we're working with children not in education or in other places around the country. And I just wonder if that virtual school, which has done fantastic work, just needs to have a little tweak, because the circumstances have changed. You may have already done that, I don't know, but I'm asking that question. What I found particularly interesting is that if you're a murderer and you're put in prison, you're classified as being in unsuitable accommodation. And I just thought that was incredible. So I've learned something absolutely amazing today. But you are classed as being in education, employment or training. So while one goes up, one goes down. So I've got a smile on my face when I say that, but that's what I'm saying, that extra additional text, whoever's put that in, it's really helpful to know that. I would like to make a case that if you're in prison for murdering someone, you probably are in suitable accommodation, actually. But I don't think the rules are going to change. So in essence, I also want to continue to shine a light on children in care participating learning, and generally make sure that we're doing our absolute best for them, as I believe we are. But now might be a good time to review it, and I want to pass on my thanks to Kieran.
Thank you. I'll make sure that Kieran's aware of those. Thank you. So thank you for that. Just in terms of the arrangements at the moment, so Martin and I were involved in a recruitment process, and we've appointed an interim head of the virtual school, who those of you that attend corporate parenting panel will meet very soon. So that's Sarah Lane, who's worked as a manager within the team, and is a really very strong and committed individual. So she's working very closely with our social care teams and with Martin's education teams in terms of looking at some, you know, creative opportunities really in terms of taking forward the work that Kieran's done, but you know, in her own way. So you know, that the committees will hear more about that in due course. But I think the point about the targets is a really good one, and I was going to say, had there been any questions around the reoffending target, that it will no longer be a YJB KPI because of the absolute challenges, one of getting the data, two, the length of time and the lag in getting that performance data, but also because I think it's now nationally recognised that it tells you very little about the performance of our team, really, because it is now such a reducing and small number of young people, and the ability to track when the data is so old is really difficult. So it's good to know that that's been those views have been listened to, I think, really. I don't know if I've answered your question or not now, Councillor Matthews.
You have answered my question, and I'm really pleased that, if you like, what is a brilliant, innovative service created by Lincolnshire County Council is going to be reviewed in a changing world, really, and that we've recruited a good leader to replace Kieran. What's intriguing is that information comes up in corporate parenting and information comes up in children and young people. And sometimes they don't quite tell the same story. Not because anyone's telling fibs, but because of the requirement to report under different headings. And I don't know how we can harmonise that. But anyway, but no, I've had answers to all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Heather, I think you wish to comment.
I think the facts, so I think in terms of the published data, so this committee's published data, so it links back to that, what's validated, what's not. Yours is a subcommittee, so you can have very live data. So you probably see more change in your data, you see much more up-to-date data because you're seeing live what's happening to those children and young people. In terms of the published data and the targets, they're set within very key metrics. So I think that is why we see a difference. And in terms of harmonising it, I think what we probably need is for this report to come to the corporate parenting panel so that you get in that what's the snapshot that's going to become the reporting, because that's how the reporting system works.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that was a suggestion from you, but likewise for Councillor Cleaver, who's saying, so what is this proportion against national? That would resolve that straight away, that we would see our own children in the context of national performance in a way that we don't at the moment. So can I suggest that that's a really good idea? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Wright, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and whilst agreeing with Joe about the ineffectiveness of the target for reoffending, I didn't call it tosh, I just said ineffective, and whilst also being aware of all the work that's going on, all the good work, I just have some concern with regards to the actual first-time offender figures. Now, I wasn't involved in 2019, so I can't see from the graph whether the December 19 was the start of a decline in numbers or whether that was a peak. But what I can see is that since COVID and all the implications of figures not really reflecting the true figure of what was happening, and the fact that we still do have significant clogs in huge parts of the court system, should you know, just a few bells be ringing now that we're seeing? I know it's a slight rise this time, but it's a slight rise on the last time, and the last time we're now seeing the figures are only 10 below that peak of December 2019, you know, have we reached a peak, or are we going to see a rise again? And what can we do about it? Because, say, with the courts being in the state they are, I don't think that's a true reflection of the figures anyway.
So just in relation to our first-time entrant figures, the situation changed. It is going back a number of years. So in 2017, we introduced the Joint Diversionary Panel and that process. So we saw a really significant drop as that happened. And I think we did expect at some point that the drop wouldn't continue and would perhaps start to rise. And interestingly, the kind of thing that has the biggest impact on the on first-time entrants is the police and the activity of the police. So through our recent inspection, what was suggested to us was to consider whether or not every young person that came to the Joint Diversionary Panel was right to come. It's really positive, it's really effective. The young people that come get a really positive service as a result of coming. And we know that often the case is that it's not the young person's offending behaviour that's an issue, it's everything else around them. And through that panel, we've got some really good and effective interventions. So the police are really keen to refer lots of young people through that panel, and we need to look at making sure that the right young people come and that other young people get their needs met through school and other services, if that kind of makes sense. The other thing is that there has been a real review of cautions. So we have virtually no cautions at all now for young people in Lincolnshire, which is a really positive thing, because it's a significant, something that impacts significantly but offers no positive intervention. We do have some conditional cautions, and they are where there is a record, that there will be a record for that young person, but it offers a positive intervention. And I think we have to be really robust around JDP. So for those young people that come and perhaps have a restorative intervention and then come back, we need to consider whether actually conditional caution is appropriate at a later stage, if that makes sense. So I do think there's nothing that we're particularly worried about yet, but we do keep a real eye on that data and at a real individual level. And because it's our data, we can do that and we can track that. Whereas the national reoffending one is Ministry of Justice information. We don't even know who the individuals are, and it's really difficult to track. So I have much more confidence in the meaningfulness of the first-time entrant, if that makes sense. But I do think we expected it to go up a bit.
Thanks very much for that. If we have no further questions and none have been indicated, just to recap on the actions required of us, we've been invited to review and comment on the performance of the measures that are either above or below target. I propose that the committee has reviewed the report and is satisfied with the performance of the measures that are either above or below target, and obviously some comments and suggestions have been made for future reports which have been noted. Can you please raise your hand if you agree with my proposal? Thank you, that is agreed. Thank you. We now move on to item 10, which is the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item sets out our work programme for 2023, and I'd like to invite Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, to present the report. Over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no amendments to the published work programme to report. There have been several reports added to the 21st of April agenda since the last meeting of the committee, which I'd just like to highlight to members. The report on the social care reform consultation will set out the government's consultation on the children social care stable homes built on love implementation strategy, which was launched on the 2nd of February. A report on the outcomes from the inspection of the Youth Offending Service by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, His Majesty's Inspectorate on Probation will set out the findings from the Youth Offending Inspection, which took place in January, as mentioned by Councillor Mrs Bradwell earlier. An exempt pre-decision scrutiny report on Sutterton Fourfields Primary School for 2-class extension and existing site drainage works has been added. This is prior to a decision by the Leader of the Council between the 2nd and 5th of May. Members may recall that decision report on Sutterton Fourfields Primary School was considered by the committee in April last year, which was to expand the school's capacity from the 1st of April 2023 to cope with increasing demand for places in the area. So this decision will be for some building works to enable the school to cope with the increased capacity. And an exempt report, a pre-decision scrutiny report on Lincoln St Francis School refurbishment and external works has also been added. This again is a prior to a decision by the Leader of the Council between the 2nd and 5th of May. This decision is part of the Building Communities for Specialist Provision strategy, which the committee has considered on several occasions previously. And this report was originally listed for the June meeting, but has been brought forward due to an early decision being required. And then lastly, just to highlight on the July agenda, the pre-decision report on Holbeach William Stukeley Primary School is now confirmed. The report will be exempt and is in relation to a single class extension, hall and staff room extension. And again, a decision will be taken by the Leader of the Council between the 26th and 31st of July. So that concludes my update, Chairman, and I would welcome suggestions from members of the committee for additional items for the work programme. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy. I think Councillor Matthews, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. It's a very full programme. I'm particularly interested in item 1, update on community response to high-level mental health needs. And I'm wondering if it's too late to ask Charlotte to link with the Director of Public Health and to have input from, I can't think of her name, Lucy Gavins, on our work there. But again, and I would particularly then like that report linked to the areas of deprivation that were highlighted in the Director of Public Health report and that we've referred to earlier today, so that we understand that this is a focused report on community response to high-level mental health needs, not a generic one. I'm sure it won't be a generic one, but I'm asking specifically if that can be done.
I'll take that away and have a chat with Charlotte about it and see if it'll be included.
That's great. If we have no further suggestions, as usual, the actions required of us as a committee to review and agree our work programme as set out in the report and highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which could be considered for inclusion in the work programme. I propose that the work programme is agreed, and if you agree with me, could you raise your hand? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of the meeting, and I'd like to thank everyone for their involvement, engagement, contributions, which have been widespread and wide-ranging, and also thanks to the officers for fielding the various questions that have been put to them. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you.